Welcome to the OSCAL Foundation headquarters. I hope you like it. My name is John Banghart. I'm a senior director with Venable. Venable is in fact the building that you're in today. I know we've worked with many of you over the years. For some of you, this might be new. Happy to talk more about what Venable is and where we're getting involved in this and why. But in the interest of time and to keep everybody interested in the content, we're going to go ahead and move forward pretty quickly here this morning. I've heard there's some snow flurries maybe coming later. Not sure about that. I've put in a request to the Capital Weather Gang to push that off into the evening. I don't have a lot of confidence that that's going to work, but we're going to cross our fingers and hope for the best. And on that note, those of you that did come in person today, thank you so much. We really, really do appreciate that. Just as much as we appreciate the folks that are online today, I think we had well over 100 to 120 people signed up for the virtual session from all over the world, which was great. So we're very excited about that. But obviously very happy to have you all here with us in the room today. We will wrap up today by 4. For those of you that need to scramble home, that's fine, but we will have some refreshments and drinks upstairs. Hopefully you can stay, even if it's just to grab a drink and a snack for the road. But in any event, we will wrap up today at 4. So let's go ahead and dive in here a little bit. Just a couple quick logistics things. Most of you probably found the restrooms, but if you have not, the ladies' room is just out here, sort of off to the left. The men's room is in the far opposite corner of this building. So you will get your steps in if you're going to use that restroom. But just kind of walk out here, go all the way down, keep going, and eventually you'll find it. And if you needed the coat closet, there is a coat closet out there as well. If you want to move any of your things at some point, please do. We've got myself and several other folks that are here in support of the OSCAL Foundation from Venable. Any one of them can help you with anything that you might need. We do have 3 of the conference rooms on this floor reserved. So if you need to step out to take a call, any of these rooms that are out here are for use. They're first come, first serve. So if you want to fight your colleagues for the room, you can do, but those rooms are available for your use throughout the day. Please feel free to take advantage of those if you need to step away. Otherwise, you can wander about this floor. You can go up to the 10th floor if you want and wander around out there. You can go outside if you want to brave the cold. That space is available as well. But nevertheless, we've got great facilities here for you today, and please take advantage of them. So I imagine that most of you here and most of the folks online, if you knew enough to come to this session today, you're probably pretty familiar with what OSCAL is and isn't. But we also know that OSCAL has been gaining a lot of traction around the world. And so we might have some new folks here today. So I just wanted to start out with just the simple definition, of what OSCAL is for folks that might be online or in the room that are new to this. The Open Security Controls Assessment Language, machine-readable, originally developed by NIST. The standard itself still housed at NIST. We're thankful to have Dr. Iorga from NIST with us today. Simplifies and standardizes information around security assessments through automation. It's a lot of buzzwords in one definition, but I think it captures it pretty well, right? It captures the spirit of what OSCAL is all about, why it has been developed, and I think, in fact, does a great job of sort of characterizing, why OSCAL has taken on and become so important and popular within this space and continues to grow. What is the OSCAL Foundation? This one might be more new to some of you because it is a relatively new organization. We are a 501c3, a nonprofit that was founded. We're incorporated here in Washington, D.C. as of few weeks ago, so a relatively new organization, but as many of you know, we've been discussing this and planning this now for several months. Several of you that I see in the room, and of course many of you online as well, participated in previous planning meetings as we were thinking about what should, do we need an OSCAL Foundation, yes or no? And if the answer is yes, which it turned out to be, what should that foundation do? What should it not do? How can we be helpful? And so throughout all of that, we've arrived here today at what is our formal kickoff meeting to get the foundation started. And in addition to the panels that you'll hear from today, we're going to talk a little bit about, at the end, what will the foundation be doing, what will its members be involved in, why you should become a member, and we'll spend quite a bit of time on that. So looking forward to that. We did launch a website. Went live yesterday, so we're pretty excited about that. I think it's a great milestone. I remember I've been at this a long time, as many of you have, when launching a website felt like a much bigger deal than it is today because it was a pretty big milestone, but we're very excited to have OSCALFoundation.org, have the website set up, and looking forward to continuing to build out that content. Like any good website, we're going to have plenty of the latest news, not just about the foundation, but from around the OSCAL community, anything that are updates to the OSCAL standard, anything future sources for great resources that exist. Obviously, there's a great deal of work going on across OSCAL internationally, here in the US and overseas. We'll hear about some of that today. And we want this website to just be one of those places where you can come and find that information, find sort of the best things that are out there to help your organization. And in addition, we want to develop some of those resources. And Stephen, who many of you know, will talk more about that later today in terms of what will the foundation be producing to help fill in some of those spaces where we might need some more types of guidance, types of awareness, adoption, and so on. So we're looking forward to doing some of that. It is a membership-driven organization. If you're interested, after you hear about what membership means today, I'll be your primary point of contact for that. And I'll be happy to chat with you about what membership looks like and why you might be interested in joining the foundation. So I mentioned a couple of these already, but in year one, so basically starting now through the end of this year, we've got 4 primary things that we want to focus on. Now, these are general in nature, like any good membership organization. The particulars of this will be driven by our members. So as that continues to shape up, we'll be continuing to get input around what do we want these things to look like. But we want to focus on technical meetings. Global outreach is going to be an important part of this, right? Helping to expand and build upon some of the great work that's already happening there to amplify the OSCAL message and continue to raise awareness. We will be hosting additional in-person events. We don't know exactly what those will look like, but we're committed to helping the community come together, be together in productive ways, technical meetings, more sort of policy and strategy type meetings. We want to be able to fulfill all of those needs through the foundation. So much more to come on what that will look like and what we'll be doing there. One of our near-term goals is to create a tutorial webinar series. So this will be something that we're going to start working on almost right away. It will be something that we want to have input from our members on. We know that there's a lot of great resources out there. We're not looking to duplicate or to be redundant, but we want to take advantage of that and build on it and construct the things that the membership of the foundation believes the community can benefit from. So that's going to be an area that we're highly focused on, really wanting to promote OSCAL, get the message out in ways that will be helpful, particularly for organizations, public and private sector, that might be OSCAL curious, if you will, but don't really know where to start or what it means. And so creating some of those resources and webinars will be a primary goal for us this year as well. So we've got a really packed agenda today. My commitment to you is we are going to absolutely try and end by 4 o'clock. I think I mentioned that earlier. We'll just pretend if it starts to snow, we can close more of the curtains so you don't have to think about that. We can do whatever, but we will try and get everybody here out by 4 o'clock today. That said, we have a really full agenda, some great panels. So really looking forward to getting into that. In a moment, I'll introduce our keynote speaker, Hart Rossman from AWS. We'll have a FedRAMP use case panel. One around the global use case, right? Generally for OSCAL, and looking at some examples, both here, but with our foreign partners, that we'll have a great discussion there. A great discussion around the financial services use case. Obviously, financial services is not the only sector where OSCAL is leveraged, but it's an important one, and it's one that there's been a lot of interest in. And we've got a number of financial services folks both here with us today and who will join us online to talk about the importance of OSCAL to their mission and where they would like to see things go. And then finally, we'll wrap up the day with some more information about the foundation itself, what the membership structure looks like, and talk in more detail about what some of the technical activities will be, how those will come together. Communications about all of this will start next week, probably on Monday. If you have joined the membership at that point, we will start communicating actively with all of our members. That will include soliciting input on sort of some of these particulars that we mentioned, but also giving some direction from us in terms of this is what we're going to be working on, here's where things are headed. And so as members of the organization, you're going to get regular updates starting next week in terms of what the foundation is working on. So be looking forward to that. If you're interested in becoming a member, you've got a couple of avenues today. There's some sheets on the tables. You're welcome to put your name, email down, and we can reach out to you. At the end, there'll be a slide with my name and email up there, and you can reach us that way. We are in the process, in addition to our website, of finishing up the rest of our infrastructure. So we'll have OSCAL Foundation emails and workspaces and things like that. But we want to hear from you, right? And that's even if you just have questions, right? Why would I want to become a member? What is that going to mean for me? What's the right place for me to connect? So please, if you're interested, let us know that so that we can reach out to you, or you can reach directly to us so that we can have that conversation. So that's enough for me. So I'm going to step out of the way, and I'm going to ask Hart to join us up here on stage, if you could, Hart. And Hart's going to start us off with some of his opening remarks. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it, everybody. Maybe there's a different slide we can forward to. We'll just go there. Hey, it's great to see everybody. Foundation, and this foundation in particular, is all about building community. And so it's just so heartening to see so many friends and colleagues from over the years. Jim and I were just chatting about the good old days when I had hair up here and not down here, right? He was getting started with the Center for Internet Security, right? So it's all about building community, right? So thanks everybody for coming. Those of you who were able to brave the soon-to-be weather, I think, and then of course those of you with us online. I look after security in the field at AWS, and it's a fun opportunity I've had to travel around the world and really listen to what customers value most about their journey in technology. And the theme of automating security operations, automating compliance is a constant bit of feedback I get. And so, innovation, security automation are something I'm passionate about. I think customers all over the world, right, academia, government and industry are all passionate about that. And so being able to come together here to create a foundation together that helps foster that is really exciting. Creating this OSCAL Foundation is a pivotal moment in a modernization of security assurance, right? Impacting governance, risk, compliance, and privacy. And it allows us to move from manual documentation and traditional ways of working into a much more automated, machine-readable methodology. The future of compliance is all about innovation while maintaining security, right? OSCAL is going to be the bridge that helps us get there, right? Fuels innovation and does it in a safe and secure manner. This foundation really represents an ambitious set of goals, right? Started, as John mentioned, with NIST and the visionary leader we have in Dr. Michaela Iorga, right, who I think all of you know, or all of you will soon come to know, right? Her vision, her drive, her passion to create a better way of doing things at NIST has brought us all together and created an opportunity for us through this foundation, right, to bring bar-raising security experience to people all around the world. Over the next couple of years, I would expect to see a transformation, right, based on the work we're going to do here in this foundation. Some poetry in motion, if you will, of the automation of security and the orchestration of security activities that historically has just been very challenging to do. Things that would take months or sometimes years to accomplish, we'll be able to do at machine-readable speed, right? Which I think is pretty exciting. And this foundation is going to help guide that journey. And all of you, right, have an opportunity to participate strategically, technically, through the work you do and through the guidance and advice you can give. I would also imagine there's going to be a significant positive economic impact, right? By reducing the time to value through compliance and security automation and creating, honestly, new sectors of industry around OSCAL and around the work that can be done here that enable better accuracy as well as continuous improvement of security posture, right? I think there's a lot of benefits to be gained from the work that this foundation will do, and I think the economics of it will speak for itself. If we go back in time, though, just a couple of years, right, sort of think, what was underpinning some of the work that Dr. Iorga and others were doing in the space? And, there was in 2022, the FedRAMP Authorization Act, which was really a watershed moment. It encoded in law and regulation this idea that security automation is a requirement. It's no longer just a best practice for those who have the technical talent to focus on it at the bleeding edge, right? And I've long believed that you can both move fast and stay secure. And there's a corollary to that, this idea that we can only protect what we truly understand. And OSCAL gives us that bridge to both, right? It automates things to let us move fast and stay secure, and does it in a machine-readable, transparent way, so we can deeply understand what's going on in the system and make good decisions, right, about how to move things forward, how to advance your risk management, your security operations posture, right? But it's not just about machine readability of documentation. It really is about how we just approach security assurance at scale and the way we drive innovation in the marketplace, right? At AWS, we're really excited to be one of the members helping establish the foundation, along with many of our colleagues in government, industry, and academia. And our customers, as I mentioned earlier, around the world, in public sector and commercial, really continually talk about the benefits they see from security automation. AWS was one of the first companies to provide an OSCAL formatted system security plan back in 2022, right? We learned a lot doing that. We got a lot of coaching and guidance from Dr. Iorga and NIST and the rest of the team, right? And it's just sort of a platform that we can now build upon, both to share some of our lessons learned, but as each of you have taken your own journey in OSCAL, right? We can bring all that together to move faster, right? And to move in a more intelligent way together. And we're seeing encouraging adoption signals globally. We're going to hear from a panel a little bit later on, but everything from some of the work in Australia with the information security manual they're updating, to some of the work going on in Singapore with their security framework initiatives, right? But if we're being honest about it, right, when you're starting a foundation, it's super early days, right? And I think we all a little bit wonder, what could this be, right? It took a lot of momentum to get to the starting line. And how do things maybe play out going forward? Well, got a couple of quick ideas to share with you about that. I think the first that's really key is to understand that the foundation is launching at a really exciting time in innovation, right? It's awesome to be in the early days of doing something new at global scale in a community like this, right? Gen AI is just becoming a thing, right? Crypto and digital ledgers, right, are finally finding their footing. We've got really phenomenal advances in machine learning and provable security fueled by the mathematics of automated reasoning, right? There's so much innovation going on in the marketplace. The app economy is giving a little bit of room now for the agentic economy. And in the middle of all this, right, we're providing an opportunity to drive security automation at scale, right, with a transparent, scalable, right, and flexible language that's community driven, right, and foundation supported. It's really the best time to launch a foundation like this, the center of all this amazing innovation. I can imagine a world, literally just a couple of months from now, right, where you've got a multi-agentic Gen AI workflow that allows security engineers, software developers, and auditors, right, to threat model, to design and implement security controls, to map those controls, to test and validate them, right, to demonstrate the veracity or the effectiveness of those controls, and then feed that into a continuous improvement model, right? And all being able to do that seamlessly because every one of those agents speaks OSCAL natively, right? It's all just done machine readable at machine speed. And that future is not so far off, right, as we work on some of these things together in the foundation. And so practically speaking, what are some of the things that the foundation is going to focus on? We're going to hear a lot of details about that in just a few moments, but at a high level, it's supporting experimentation and implementation. It's developing practical use cases and promoting best practices, and developing global education and adoption strategies, right, for OSCAL. I think one of the nice byproducts of that is that we're going to, I think, continue to publish on top of the open source GitHub and other repos that NIST has provided, tools and integrated tool chains that allow us to implement and automate faster and create a virtuous cycle of learning so that as the community, as the foundation develops these best practices, they're backported into the tools, and every new adopter has an easier, better experience than those who came before, right? And so as I kind of wrap up this little monologue here, I've got a couple of calls to action. The first is that the success of this foundation, at least I truly believe, requires collaboration and participation from a broad assortment of both talent and interests, and that the foundation is going to provide the structure for that collaboration. We want a lot of perspectives. We want a variety of different capabilities. It's awesome if your area of expertise is tech communications. It's equally awesome if you're a software developer, right? It's equally awesome if you're a strategist or a policymaker. And it's also pretty nice if you're a lawyer, right? We welcome you too. And so we want those different perspectives to come and participate and drive. The second thing is that OSCAL, I believe, is the keystone in a virtuous cycle of security improvement. The ability to author documents in a shared language, and organizations can both publish and consume those machine-readable documents and be able to take timely action, right? Either by routing it to a human for a good risk-based decision or routing it to another machine to take appropriate action, right? And so this whole idea of a virtuous cycle of learning, of automation, of action, I think is really critical. And so together we can fuel the next generation of security assurance, impacting governance, risk, compliance, and privacy. And most importantly, underpinning the next generation of innovation, right, with a security language that can keep up with that pace. And so we can collectively interact at machine speeds to raise the bar for online security. And so I thank you all for taking the time today, whether you're a part of the foundation today, you're here to learn about it, or perhaps you're here to share what we're doing here with the rest of the world. Thank you all for coming, and have a safe trip back braving the weather. Cheers.
All right, I'll get our first panel up. Pirooz, if you want to grab your folks and come on up to the stage, we'll talk about our use case, our FedRAMP use case next. It was fun sort of listening to Hart and his remarks, because some of you may or may not know this, but a long time ago, I worked on the Security Content Automation Protocol, SCAP. How many people remember that? For better or worse, right? And I see some of the lessons learned in how OSCAL has been approached and how OSCAL has been successful in ways that SCAP wasn't. And I think that's great, right? I think that's, number one, a true testament to the power of OSCAL, and I'm heartened to continue to be a part of this, and still have fond memories of SCAP during my NIST days, but even looking more forward to where we're headed with OSCAL. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Pirooz for our next panel. Take it away.
Is this on? Is this on? Okay.
You're all set.
Well, let's get the first panel going. Well, I want to first thank the Venable team for putting together this event and spearheading the OSCAL Foundation. This is an initiative near and dear to my heart. An important one, as Hart mentioned. And thanks, Hart, for the keynote. Hart and I got a chance to coach our daughter's soccer team together several years ago. It's good to see you again. So we're here to talk about FedRAMP and OSCAL. My name is Pirooz Javan. I'm the CTO of Easy Dynamics. We provide public sector, federal customers, cybersecurity, cloud computing, and compliance automation services. When I think about the FedRAMP program, I think about an organization that really stands at the cornerstone of federal cybersecurity, serving as the government's standardized approach to security assessments, authorizations, and continuous monitoring of cloud service providers. Since its inception in 2011, it has transformed the way cloud technologies are adopted and standardized with robust security practices. And really, in an era where cyber threats continue to evolve and really target our national infrastructure, the role of the FedRAMP program in maintaining consistent cyber practices across these cloud deployments is critical now more than ever. But it's not all with roses, right? There's some challenges that the program faces. A backlog that continues to grow, a timeline to onboard that could be excessive of a year, and that's if you get an agency sponsor, challenging authorization paths that are being addressed. And we have a standard that's emerged that provides us a really good opportunity to tackle some of these problems. One that has efficiencies through automation by simply standardizing 7 documents across our risk management framework. I'm here today with our panelists, 2 individuals that know a thing or two about both of these topics. I'm excited to learn a little bit more about them. So without further ado, let's get going with some introductions. Travis, why don't you start us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Sure. So I'm Travis Howerton, one of the co-founders and CEO here at RegScale. We're a continuous controls monitoring company that's really trying to help modernize GRC for an environment that's more cloud native, dynamic, and really is embracing transformation going forward. My background's all national security, spent 20 plus years in the U.S. nuclear weapons program, retired as the first chief technology officer there. Went to Oak Ridge National Lab, got to be part of the IT service division there, and helped build the world's fastest supercomputer and some other big science toys. And then led digital transformation globally for Bechtel, which is the world's largest engineering, procurement, and construction company. And so everywhere I've been, sort of risk and compliance processes have been the long pole in the tent to being able to drive the organization where it wanted to go. And at RegScale, we're excited to be part of helping those programs move at the same speed that development moves, and proud to be a tool that's based entirely on the OSCAL standard. So excited to be here and excited to be part of the foundation.
I'm Brian Ruff. I'm an independent consultant. I was one of the co-creators of the OSCAL standard. At the time, I was with the FedRAMP PMO as an authorization lead. And when Michaela approached Matt Goodrich and said, hey, we want to create this thing called OSCAL, they said, well, Brian's been making all kinds of noise about automating, and let's send him down there and see what he could do. So my mandate was to make sure that OSCAL could fully support FedRAMP's processes when it was complete. I did that not just based on a foundation of understanding FedRAMP's process as well, but I had time doing business process reengineering in the cyberspace, process automation, and other areas of cyber, early assessment automation work. So I brought all those skills to bear as I helped create that. And now I'm an independent focusing on cyber automation, FedRAMP alignment, and OSCAL enablement.
Thanks, Brian. So a little bit about what you do. Tell us a little bit about how OSCAL fits into your work. Ryan.
All right. So I've been seeing a lot of CATO activities, and then I've also been seeing a lot of evolution of how to apply OSCAL in general. I spent the last 4 months consulting back to the FedRAMP PMO, where we were trying to refresh the way PMO is expressing their data using OSCAL, trying to shift as much as possible to using core OSCAL, only extending it where necessary. But beyond that, the continuous authorization, continuous assessment space, people use different terms for it, but the idea of doing as much as we can to monitor and using OSCAL as the fabric to stitch together agents and dashboards and other tools that might be feeding data in. Seeing a lot of organizations really trying to do more with that.
Yep. On our side, we see sort of OSCAL as a foundational capability we deliver in our platform. Our customers, what we see just increasingly is it's a business imperative to get better at understanding risk at these real-time environments. At some level of scale and complexity in the cloud and size of the organization, there's no other answer than automation. And traditional approaches in governance, risk, and compliance and software just don't work in today's environment at that scale. There's not enough time, money, and people, and we don't live in an environment of unlimited time, money, and people, both from what you can hire as well as budgets and other things that you see today. So something's got to change. And so we just thought when we first saw OSCAL and we were around it from the earliest days, we thought it's really the only answer to the problem. So if you truly care about risk and you care about security, then you're going to have to do it closer to real time. Point in time audits in environments that are dynamic, you're kind of kidding yourself if you think that drives real world security, right? You've got to have more real time insights, but at the same time, we don't have enough people to throw at the problem. So you've got to have a foundation for automation. And so it's really exciting to sort of stand on the shoulders of giants at NIST and Michaela and David and Wendell and others who've put together this foundation that now companies like us can build automation platforms on to help solve real world problems, because there's got to be a way to do it. And nobody really cares what RegScale thinks about how to do it, but everybody cares about what NIST thinks, right? And so the ability to have that common foundation under the hood, I just really applaud the leadership of the OSCAL team, and it's exciting to be part of it.
So the common foundation is important. Is there anything else about OSCAL specific that you think sets it apart that makes it more appropriate, at least from a timing standpoint now?
Yeah, there's a few things. So the OSCAL is definitely not the first attempt to make the assessment process, the authorization process, machine readable. There have been several others with a lot of great minds and great energy behind it. I think the things that set OSCAL apart are first the granularity. A lot of the activities in the past were less granular because the information can be so overwhelming. But I think the more granular approach that OSCAL takes is what's necessary, even though it does make it more challenging. The second, I think, is that many of the other efforts were taking one stakeholder's perspective, whereas OSCAL really took an end-to-end approach to the process and looking at the data needs every step of the way. And then finally, OSCAL is the only one of those efforts that's coming from a formal standards body like NIST and has that not just that weight behind it, but also the experience that went into the creation of OSCAL to make it a viable standard.
Yeah, and I think some of it's just market timing. I think there were a lot of smart people who worked on this problem, but the technology just wasn't there yet. But now we live in an API economy where it's easy to get data. So now it's more about getting it in a consistent format. We have almost unlimited compute capacity today with modern cloud solutions. We just heard from AWS, like they can scale to sort of any level of compute we need to process these sorts of things. And we're also moving into an AI economy that can now glean insights in real time off these massive amounts of data. So I think the state of the art in technology is so much different than it was before, which is going to enable better outcomes and better results. And then I would sort of double click and agree with the completeness. Most of the other tools solved like a sliver of the problem, but they didn't go end to end. I think part of the benefit and curse of OSCAL right now is that it solves the end-to-end problem. The hard part is the learning curve of being able to do all of that at that level and kind of bring a community with you, which is why the foundation, I think, fills a critical role stepping into that gap to help bridge that learning curve so that the tool vendors can build better solutions on top of it and make this more approachable, where you don't need really high-end R&D shops to pull it off. It becomes more of a commoditized thing that you can buy and use in your programs.
So I think a couple of years ago, there was a workshop that was held by NIST, and I think the GRC vendors were up there. Brian, I think you were up there as well. One of the questions that was asked was, tell us what's difficult about, or tell us what's been some of the biggest challenges of adopting OSCAL. And the answer was consistent across all GRC providers. The amount of flexibility in the platform makes it difficult to handle all the deviations or all the scenarios which you can encounter. Is that something that you've overcome, or is that something that you're still feeling like you're still dealing with all the flexibility and the standard within the GRC platform?
I think Travis will be better at this one than I am, but I'll start. I think that that's still a big challenge today. I do think that the flexibility is a strength, especially as we get into all the different use cases. I would say that what's really becoming clear is that you need to just focus on your use case and look at what's been done already with OSCAL. And if there's nothing that's been done in your use case or there's not clarity in that, then be the first, be a little bold. Let's get a line in the sand, which then promotes conversation, right? And I think that's, getting a consensus around the best way to express something in OSCAL to approach a problem is going to be the key. And that's one of the things I hope the foundation really helps to drive.
I think the answer to that varies on use case. And so I think when you think of OSCAL as a publishing language to automate the assessment process, I think its flexibility is awesome. And I kind of view it like a compiler. And Dr. Spina gave that analogy, and it's been the one that's been easiest for me to communicate to folks, is you take all your RMF stuff, you publish it out in machine readable, and it's like, does it compile? That's the first step. And you can check it against all your risk tolerances, your validation, and it can be specific to your use case. And so I think flexibility is a pro there, because now you can tailor that to exactly what your org, your use case, your vertical needs. I think where it's challenging is when people try to take it from being sort of a publishing process to trying to be more of a data portability standard, where those variances can make it hard to sort of lift and shift this package from tool A to tool B and move. So I think that flexibility makes it a little harder there. But in the core use case of publishing, I actually like the flexibility.
Likewise, I think that's necessary for the adoption that's needed across the various use cases. So last year, White House also felt that OSCAL was pretty important in OMB 2415, modernizing the FedRAMP program. Among many goals and responsibilities, agencies are to ensure that governance, risk, and compliance tools and system inventory tools can produce, transmit, and ingest machine-readable authorization artifacts in OSCAL. What do you see as the biggest challenges agencies have in modernizing their existing GRC tools?
Yeah, I'll start there. So like the first one is most of those GRC tools on the FedRAMP, they feed an authorizing official. That authorizing official is typically not someone who's super comfortable with low-level command line tools and machine-readable formats. So they don't like it. And so the customer is designed for doesn't like the experience they're getting. The opportunity is for software vendors, and there's a lot of them in this room that are innovating on OSCAL to make that experience awesome for the human and awesome for the machine-readable side. All the ROI is going to come out of the machine-readable side. So tooling, being able to talk to tooling, automate assessment, do all that piece, that's all going to come out of the machine-readable side that we're excited about. But if the human experience is lacking, then adoption becomes hard, right? Because you don't see it in contracts where they're spending money. And if they're not spending money, then industry doesn't drive innovation in that area. They drive it in the area they are spending money, right? And so I think it's part of that chicken egg of how do you balance the human and the machine experience in OSCAL. That is the key to making adoption take off. Because I think anyone who's a technologist who's seen it sees the power of what OSCAL could be. But if your customers can't interact with it in a way that drives an outcome, it becomes hard to use it.
Yeah, I like that. I think there's both technical and organizational challenges with the adoption that on the technical end, certainly everything Travis mentioned, the granularity I mentioned before of OSCAL, I think a lot of GRC tools struggle, a lot of existing GRC tools struggle with that if they weren't OSCAL native. And so getting that proper fidelity on the integration, I think it's an overcomable challenge, but I do think it's something that's slowing adoption down a little bit. The other though is, GRC tools in federal agencies, at least, they're the keys to the castle. All of the sensitive information about all of the systems are in there. And so they're very close held. Agencies that only require 2 representatives per system, no more than 2 representatives per system have access. And we need to shift that thinking without diluting the security that offers, meaning that we need to have more connectivity between these different systems. That single repository with all of the security data still needs to be limited access, but it needs to be getting more real-time feeds. It needs to move to more of a dashboarding approach, executive dashboards, correlation, that sort of thing. So I think there's a mindset shift that has to occur.
Yeah, Brian, I'm really glad you mentioned that. The culture shift is, I've supported, I think, 12, 13 accreditation efforts in the public sector. And only one time did I get access to the GRC solution. And it was never through an API to really automate anything. So there is a bit of a culture shift in the GRC platforms that has to happen at the agencies as well. Good point, Brian. So looking at just the broader automation goals of OMB 2415, how do you see OSCAL integration changing the day-to-day work of security assessment teams?
This starts to also touch into CATO a little bit, or continuous authorization, in that I think a lot of, as we automate more, there are things that we're going to be able to check continuously, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, that we're currently only checking yearly. And so as we start to move things from that annual snapshot in time into that, let's monitor this all the time, you're going to start to take some of the workload off of assessment teams. And I think that is going to let those assessment teams either get to more systems or do a deeper dive on the areas where they really require the human judgment. When I know this analysis was easier with 853 Rev 4 than with Rev 5. Rev 4, all the controls used to start with either the system must or the organization must. Where it was the system must, that's probably a technical control and it's probably easier to monitor under CATO. Where it was the organization must, that's usually like a process, a procedure, a plan. Now, if you get workflows going, maybe you can monitor that, but it's harder to monitor those pieces. And in Rev 4, 40% of the controls were the system must and 60% were the organization must. So that tells you that like what you can monitor automatically was more like the 40% side. You could maybe expedite that on the other 60%. I think with Rev 5, they went away from that because they're recognizing more solutions are moving from the manual process into the automation space. They didn't want to tie organizations down in the way the requirement was written. So maybe we're getting to more like 60-40 instead of 40-60, but there's still always going to be that piece that's going to require the human judgment and the manual verification.
Yeah, I like to think of like the normal Pareto analysis. I think most analysts I've worked with spend 80% of their time doing the thing that adds 20% of the value, meaning they're constantly out getting data, normalizing it, grabbing screenshots, doing tons of manual work to get to the point where they're ready to make a risk-based decision, which is the value in the job. And if you were to look at sort of the Gartner view of the world, they'll say GRC is a 50 billion market, go into 100 billion. But when I look at all the ARR of every software company I know, it's probably not $5 billion, right? So what that tells you is it's a hugely labor-driven market. I think the opportunity with OSCAL and with AI is to eat into that 90% we're doing with humans today, or that 80-90%. And so I think it's really exciting to think what tools can do with the machine-readable foundation, where we can do more checks with automation. And then for the side that aren't the technical controls, AI is rapidly changing the game of what it can do that used to only be possible with humans. Increasingly, some of that knowledge work is going to be done with AI. And I would say the foundation of how fast that happens will be how well you can train that model. And models get better when they have more precise data, right? So I would say if you look at what's going on today with LLMs, they can generally be right, but generally right isn't good enough in risk and compliance in cyberspace. Nobody's taken that, especially on the government side. But if you can get the precision up by having these types of foundations, and you can get the automation up, and the models are so good that you can start to trust it with precision, I think that's how you really change the game for the hands-on keyboard, boots on ground folks.
Yeah, I think Hart was mentioning taking those things and routing some of them to a human or to a machine to do the determination. And for a period of time, we're probably gonna have to do it to both, build the confidence in those machine tests to rely on them more and more. So thank you, that was very insightful. So OMB 2415 also has potential new authorization paths. Brian was correcting me, I think. I said there's new authorization paths, but it looks like it's potential. So we do know that agencies are going to play a bigger role in onboarding CSPs. How do you envision the transition from that traditional document-based authorization package to OSCAL-based machine packages impacting ATO timeline?
I think that it has to expedite right now. FedRAMP PMO is still finalizing, like getting their ducks in a row so they can start not just accepting OSCAL packages, but really expedite moving through them. What I think we'll find is that the agencies that lean forward and also move to adopt OSCAL that can accept those packages, they're the ones that are going to be streamlined through the FedRAMP processes, and the ones that are lagging, that don't have the ability to really handle OSCAL themselves, they might still be able to be a pass-through, but they're still going to need that manual documentation to review. They're going to end up having to wait longer to get their authorization decisions. And then what you'll see is vendors favoring the agencies that have the streamlined approach when they need to get that initial authorization. So I think that the PMO getting to the point where they can really streamline their piece is critical. And then I think why agencies shouldn't wait. They should be, I realize they want to wait and see what FedRAMP does. It's the smart thing to do, but it's going to take a while, like get started on it now so that you're ready when FedRAMP's there.
Yeah, I think I was on a FedRAMP automation call, and FedRAMP was going over their extensions and some of their capabilities that were being added in the repos. And I remember somebody from a federal agency, I won't say which one, basically asked in response, when are we going to have to comply with this? Is there any tooling that you're going to provide us to support this? There was a very spectrum of where they were coming and attacking the problem from. So I do agree. I think agencies shouldn't wait, but right now with the tooling, I think they're very hesitant in terms of what tooling and how to move forward. Maybe that's something that you can speak to a little.
I think part of it's tooling, part of it, honestly, I think if you look at where FedRAMP's gone in terms of setting the security high watermark and their automation push, I think that reference architecture is great from a technology perspective. I think where they could benefit from many people in this room is having more of a commercial mindset into how they approach the problem. Like things that are hard, or like, why do you need an agency sponsor to go get a FedRAMP? Why can't it be fee for service? That's the long pole in the tent for many customers that we talk to. Maybe that fee for service goes down if you have OSCAL. So you incentivize them to do things that make it cheaper for the government to do their due diligence on the package. There's a whole variety of things that I think are structured business incentives that could get outcomes that are much better in the FedRAMP process just by thinking through the model of how they deliver that end-to-end service. And then at the lower level of classifications, there's a lot of great other solutions out there. Like I see CSAs in the room. There's others that provide their own certifications. Does everything require a FedRAMP, or can we have reciprocity in certain things? And maybe there's some OSCAL translation magic we can do in the middle to make that stuff easier. So I think there's a lot that can be done there by just thinking through the business model aspect. It's not always the technology that's the long pole in the tent. In my experience, it's seldom technology. If you get some smart engineers in the room, they almost always figure it out. It's coming up with a better mousetrap end to end that I think can solve a lot of problems there.
Yeah, for sure. Beyond basic compliance, what opportunities do you see the agencies leverage OSCAL to improve overall security assessments and continuous monitoring?
Oh, the sky's the limit. I mean, there are so many different places where OSCAL can expedite the current processes. Certainly we've been dancing around the authorization piece, and that's just such an important piece of it. But NIST hosts those those monthly workshops, and there was an organization that was demonstrating how you could go between OSCAL and infrastructure as code, for example. And so imagine building your security documentation in a way that then can cause your environment to be deployed, and the security because you deployed it from your security documentation. I always like to remind people that the P in SSP stands for plan. The thought was that the plan was created first and then you deployed. It's typically not the reality, but we can get there.
I think like nirvana is when we get to where industry adopts component definitions, right? Like, why do we every time ask every group in the government to go out and figure out how to lock this stuff down? If you're the vendor, why can't the vendor tell us how to lock it down? And why can't they publish it in a machine readable standard and then attest to it in that standard? So now all we got to do is consume the data. It's amazing to me as a taxpayer how many places we go in the government where they use 10-year-old technology. And when you ask them why they've never upgraded, they say we don't have the resources to go get an ATO for this new thing we know we need, right? So I think there's an opportunity to accelerate technology and modernization across government by using better approaches. And I think the vendor community can drive it, but I think it's a chicken egg problem that I mentioned earlier. Until the government starts voting with their wallet that we're going to put these things in contracts and we're going to make them happen because we're not going to continue to pay to do this the manual way we've always done it, then industry will be slow to adopt. But it's also an area where I think the foundation can influence the people who make those decisions and educate them. And so I think everybody in this room probably sees the benefits of what it could be, but we've got to kind of get the momentum and the rock rolling downhill.
Yeah, it's funny. The component definitions, I tend to look at that as with any system at a federal agency, you have a general design and a system components. Now you have a compliance view of those components, and that's a hard paradigm shift for many to think about, one that can actually get pretty complicated. So you mentioned something about the vendor communities participating in that. Do you see it, and I'm going off the cuff here, do you see a scenario where vendor communities would provide baseline configurations, recommendations with various component definitions, targeting various certification frameworks? Okay.
And I think it has to go that way. If you look at what DISA is doing with STIGs, there's no way that organization can keep pace with the hyperscalers. There's just no way. And so if you look at, let's go pull all the STIGs for that sort of stuff, they just really don't exist, or they're so far behind. Conversely, if we put it on industry that you need to publish these component definitions so that we can ingest it into whatever GRC tooling makes sense for us, now they can rapidly onboard new technology, and the vendors themselves can say, here's how you lock it down. They can review it. They can work that out with the vendors or suggest things, whatever they need to do. But this idea that the government's going to figure out how to lock down stuff and publish that at any pace that's anywhere near what the private sector can do, like, it's just not going to happen. And so I think there's got to be a shift in mindset of how you do those things. That's more cost effective.
And as we're waiting for the market to develop in this direction, I think we're all hedging on some of that happening. Don't shoot the messenger. As an integrator, I love component definitions, but sometimes when you're working in a conversion or transferring something into OSCAL, a component definition may not be part of that conversation. You have a standard SSP, you're not a large program, you don't have to necessarily break it down into components. And that's where I think the vendors offering that up and providing that kind of viewpoint into their products provides an opportunity downstream for system owners that are implementing their technologies.
Yeah, and I think the other strength of component definitions, especially again for agencies, I'm going to go back to my days in the early 2000s. I was doing enterprise security architecture for customs, and they had their technical reference model, the idea that these are the products that we've approved for use in agency systems, and here is the way in which those products are satisfying security requirements. So that if you pick those products, you already know you're satisfying certain requirements for the agency. Component definitions enable that model to then become machine readable and machine automated. And I think that to the degree that you start applying them not just to products, but to solutions and enterprise capabilities, the enterprise identity management solution, the SOC, the data lake for enterprise logging and auditing, right? That you start producing component definitions for those, and you are really multiplying the way in which you can enable your teams. I really should say you're reducing the level of effort for your teams while you are simultaneously helping ensure them that they will meet the security requirements just by adopting those products.
And I think the analogy, so if my buddy Nield was here, he uses the M&M analogy, which I like. For many, many years, we've done SSPs that are very broad system boundaries, and then we shove a lot of stuff into it. And then we take a point in time snapshot and we say, like, we're good to process government data. But those things are out of date almost the moment they're written. Lots of things get shoved into those things that you may not be aware of. I like the idea of components because now I can just add it to my shopping cart. I'll just go pick all the different AWS or Google or Microsoft services I'm using, the programming languages. It will just add all those controls and lockdowns immediately. And then we can push automation out to check, are we in the state we should be? That's where the industry's got to get. Then it's more like a peanut M&M. Every part of it is hard from the inside to the out, and you can check it in real time instead of a sample once a year, once every 3 years with people. So it's more cost effective and it's more secure. I think that's what the industry needs, and the industry can't get there without things like OSCAL that allow it to happen.
That M&M analogy. So let's talk about the vendor ecosystem. How do you see OSCAL really starting to play a role in the evolution of the vendor ecosystem and the tooling that's going to be available?
Let Travis go first.
Yeah, I think when you look at the vendor ecosystem, the components are a piece of it. But at the end of the day, like, almost every vendor wants to sell more of their products to whatever market they're in. So whether that's financial services, international, government, if this assessment process can happen faster for them so that they can sell more of their service, I think that's the part that the vendor community will rally around. Because almost everywhere I go, if you can spin up services in the cloud in 30 seconds and be up and running, but if my manual authorization processes still take 6 months, I'm not really saving any time at the end of the day, right?
It's like you're going through all the effort of OSCALifying, if you can
Yep.
say that, your artifacts, and then you go to through PAO and they're like, we don't really support
Exactly.
OSCAL.
But if we can do micro authorizations that are instant and automated, right? That's a huge win for the customer and for the vendor community. And I think it's something both sides can rally around because they're both getting something out of it that they want.
I think interoperability is going to be big in this space. And I know a lot of vendors historically have gravitated toward, vendor lock-in. And I think the government's made it clear that at least the federal, US federal government's made it clear that we want interoperability. If vendor lock-in is going to be a negative for us. What I think you're going to see, as I mentioned earlier, I'm probably aware of a dozen different either federal agencies or organizations working on CATO solutions. So they all have an agent they've developed. They all are using the assessment results or the assessment plan model to specify what that agent should be doing. They're all sending the telemetry of the assessment results model. Now what's going to happen is, first one in, okay, well, we've got your agent and your solution. Oh, well, here's a different agent that works better in this environment. I need it, but I'm not going to replace my dashboard, right? I need both of those agents from those two different vendors to start sending their telemetry to my dashboard. And OSCAL will make that, will make it so that vendors can be in the same environment together and interoperate in a way that I think it will be unprecedented in the cybersecurity space.
Yeah, for sure. And that communication piece is a pretty important part of it. It's almost like having HTML without HTTP. It's hard to transmit JSON files, but something that needs to evolve. So this is my last question, and then I'll kind of come back out to the crowd to see if there's any questions from the crowd. Is there anything you'd like to see the foundation help drive forward?
To me, it's just adoption. What are the practical barriers to adoption and how can the foundation remove them? Because once the ball gets rolling, the vendor community, the software community, they'll figure out how to solve this problem. They just need momentum on the customer side, and you don't get momentum on the customer side without educating them, have some reference use cases, all things the foundation could help with. And so for me, number one would be adoption, which is supported by the education, convening, all the other things the foundation will do. But adoption is the number one thing we want to see.
I have to concur on adoption. If I were to pick a number two, I think adoption is number one. If I were to pick a number two, I think it's consensus building. Again, there's a lot of opinionated opportunities out there where OSCAL can do things different ways. What's the best way? What's the way we're going to agree on it as an industry? I really like to see the OSCAL Foundation help spearhead those conversations and bring them to an actionable closure. And then along with that, I think that OSCAL is an amazing first start. As we get into things like CATO, I think we're seeing some opportunities to tweak and enhance it. NIST has limited resources. I'm sure they would love to have us prioritize what we think is most going to be important. And so having a consensus in the industry on that as well, like the next steps for OSCAL as a standard, I think are going to be very important.
And I think the body is going to be very important to bring the group together and make a decision on what to prioritize, because there's a number of those.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the foundation is in the right position to make these things happen.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and answer for myself. I think some of the patterns that we see out there are so wide that addressing some of these use cases, having a little bit more visibility in those patterns, practices, things that are, common ways of doing, let's say CATO patterns would help out a lot of adoption across the market. I'll just see if there's any questions. Oh, we do have a question.
Yeah, comment actually.
Okay.
Just talking when you mentioned
Could you wait 1 second? If there's
Ross
a
is-
microphone.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Anka Seiler from IBM. I lead the development of Trestle OSCAL Compass project in CNCF. So for the component definitions, so we have been working in the past 6 months with Dr. Michaela Iorga and with the director of CIS Workbench, Phyllis Lee. So we are going to announce this week, we have now a way to provide any CIS benchmark in the workbench in the component definition format. So you get all that technology now in the component definition. And second comment related to the SSP and relationship with component definition. I think we need to educate more the audience that the content of the two is the same. It's just reversed content. One is component to controls, the other one is controls to components. So once they see that reciprocity, one is from the technology point of view, the other one is from the auditor point of view, they may leverage them in a way that accelerates adoption.
One of my visions is that any SSP authoring tool has not just that normal controls view, but that component view, where if I'm the component owner, here's the controls my component's responsible for, and now I can tweak the data. I've already brought in that component definition. It's already like 80% written for me, but I'm the admin, I'm the component owner, and I'm tweaking it. And now that feeds back into the larger control response. And it sort of shifts responsibility out to the component owners holistically, instead of the, hey, let's ask that component owner about the logging today. Now let's ask them about how the access control is working. You know, let's get it all, let's make it more efficient for them to respond. So I like that.
So I'm going to play the bad guy. I need to move us on. Yep. Thank you so much for this panel. Some of our next panelists have some time limits, so we just need to make sure that we are respectful of that and keep us moving on. Great conversation on that one. Michaela, if you want to start heading up with your panel, that would be great. We'll get the folks that are joining us online to come on as well. So great conversation. Really thank our last panel for that. Obviously, FedRAMP is a big use case for OSCAL. It's one that has been very successful in a lot of different ways. And looking forward to continuing that conversation. So if we couldn't get to your question, you can catch up with these guys afterwards. And of course, join us with the foundation. We have plenty of opportunities to continue talking about FedRAMP and other things. So I think we have everyone. So Michaela, I'm going to hand it over to you. Please take it away.
Thank you. I'll sit down in a very strategic place so we can see our panelists that is dialing in the middle of the night from Singapore. So please let me allow to introduce my panelists here. And I will start in the order in which actually I met them in my career. But before, my name is Michaela Iorga, and at NIST I wear several hats, but for the purpose of today's gathering here, I am the NIST program director and for OSCAL, and I'm the one that people were talking earlier that came up with an idea that we need to do better within the government space, but had a bigger dream. Thank you very much, Venable team, for building the OSCAL Foundation and for launching it today. Thank you very much, Hart, for giving a big shout to the work that NIST did. I don't want this credit by myself because it's not mine. Without a proper team, NIST would not have been able to be where it is today and come here in front of you and present a language that want to be very robust. I have here from my team, one of my colleagues that was instrumental, and when I brought him, Dr. Pease, Wendell Pease, and I'd like to thank him. Because I was in, and I will give you a little bit of a story just after we are introducing the panelists. So I have here in the order in which I met, more than 15 years ago, probably, I met Jim Reavis.
In kindergarten, it was great.
Yes, yes, we were in kindergarten when cloud became, and the first mandate of move services to the cloud. And this is when I met Jim Reavis. He is the CEO for Cloud Security Alliance. And I will allow them to say a little bit about them, but something that you'll not find out is some fun stuff about every one of them. And Jim corresponded in the past, I don't know for how long, but maybe you can find out, with President Harry Truman.
True story.
True story, right. The second one I met is Vikram Khare, and we've had collaboration for a couple of years now and friendship. We built friendship and had awesome parties in the past. Don't tell anyone about that. And he serves as the director for continuous assurance engineering at Google, and he plays awesome guitar.
I try.
There is a little bit more, but about his playing guitars and his endeavors in the space, but maybe we'll throw a party and he will play something for us and we'll learn more after a drink. And then I have here Matt Weinberg from AWS, and he is the senior manager within AWS Global Services Security, which is Hart's team. More recently, I had about Matt. So sorry, I forgot to tell you that if you don't have eggs, you can go and ask him for some eggs because he has a small chicken farm. And the last but not the least, it's just because I just more recently met them, is our fourth panelist, and is Hunter Nield from Singapore GovTech. And I don't really have a fun thing about him, but I can tell you that I love his accent. You'll hear it, and I would love to copy it.
Hi, everyone.
So if you'd like to say something about your professional experience and what you're focusing on, I think that our audience will really love to hear from you.
Well, first, Michaela, you're very humble, but you're not getting away that this is really culmination of your vision and determination, and just congratulations on this. And I see this being something that's going to be so fundamental to what we're going to be doing. So I just want to first make sure I had time to say that. Cloud Security Alliance, we're a global not-for-profit organization. We will be starting our 16th year, celebrating our 16th anniversary. About 250,000 individual members around the world, in about 140 chapters, tons of research, education, certification, and we operate the STAR registry, which is based on our Cloud Controls Matrix, which is sort of the private sector version of FedRAMP. About 4,000 cloud providers in there, and I think that's going to be a fun and a key sort of platform we're going to use to, I think, really hopefully accelerate OSCAL's adoption in the market with what we're doing.
Vikram?
Vikram Khare, I'm an engineering director at Google, and I oversee different things around continuous controls monitoring, and also just GRC platform development. I've been at Google for a little over 5 years, and prior to that, I was in SaaS engineering at Oracle Cloud, and my team was building like compliance, transparency capabilities, and encryption capabilities for Oracle SaaS customers. So very excited to see the launch of the OSCAL Foundation, and hoping it can do what Travis mentioned earlier, which is really just accelerate the adoption.
Matt, please.
I guess when I'm not raising chickens, I'll tell you about that. So again, my name's Matt Weinberg. I work at AWS. I've been at AWS now for almost 5 years. I started right when the offices closed due to COVID. That's how I remember joining AWS. I work in Hart's team, supporting some security innovation efforts. Super excited to be here, and looking forward to where OSCAL is going.
Thank you. Hunter.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hunter. I'm a distinguished engineer at GovTech in Singapore. Much of what GovTech does is really provide the kind of central IT function for much of the Singapore government, approximately 100 agencies across various different ministries. And what we do, at least in that, is also provide a lot of the security controls and look after much of what we're talking about here today. My responsibility is in the technology office, very much around our center of excellence around software. And I came from a very different background. My background is actually at least having a degree in visual arts. So I'm something of a misaligned here, but certainly have had a long background in engineering and very much an interest in improving how we enable the government to deliver in Singapore.
Thank you. So I promised to tell you when I had that initial epiphany and the idea that OSCAL, the language, is a solution for what we're faced with in the government space initially and around the world. So with my head of cloud security technical lead at NIST, senior cloud security technical lead, I was organizing a lot of events. And at one of those events, I had as a guest from AWS, Bill Murray. I don't know if Hart remembers him, right? So we all know him. He is, last time when I checked with him, he was a CT, I believe. And the audience that was faced with this new technology, fantastic technology of move solutions to the cloud, really wanted to understand and have a deeper understanding of the entire stack that cloud service providers were providing, the infrastructure, and a little bit cornered him. And he said, well, look, you guys have to understand that if we open the doors to every single entity here to see how we are doing things, probably our security posture will get diminished. So we want to secure you equally, not through obfuscation, but there is a balance that we need to reach. So I thought that I had that epiphany that absolutely we need to have a means of systems to report up to us. Instead of us going down and looking into the systems and their configurations, to permit the systems to communicate what they are doing from the bottom up. And what would have been that solution? Well, have a language, right? And all the tools to speak the same language so this information can be surfaced and trusted. And it had to be done right. So initially, we started this work with FedRAMP because we wanted to help FedRAMP and government agencies, and we stayed within the government space. But the team at NIST dreamed big, and Wendell was the key there because he really came with a new set of minds and helped me and the team to drive it in the right direction and build this language that actually is able to represent multiple regulatory frameworks. With the panelists here today, I'd like to take that global angle, if possible, and see where are they coming from. How did they find OSCAL? What was the benefit for them, if possible? What is their vision? What is missing and what is not missing? So OSCAL was designed to align with the risk management approach in general, but it has a lot of customizations for government too. We want to keep the core OSCAL robust and mature to serve globally all the interested entities in the community. And how technically my friends here and peers that are on the panel are doing that, you can probably find a lot through their presentations. We have on our OSCAL workshop, the monthly workshops, a lot of presentations, technical, very deep technical presentations from Google, from AWS, from Singapore, GovTech. And I think that we had something conversation with Cloud Secure Alliance too. So I'd like to see globally how OSCAL was discovered, perceived, and what benefits do they find? Because it's aligned with the risk management and with a process. I would like to start, if possible, the conversation with Hunter, because he just demonstrated as a regulator how they approach the process. And for the entire audience here to understand, you can probably elaborate. We have here Google and AWS because Singapore deploys and uses Google and AWS. And then they are very interested in reciprocity. And how are we going to build that reciprocity? And how OSCAL can help do that. So Hunter, do you mind to let us know what exactly did you find in OSCAL and why Singapore government decided to adopt OSCAL?
Certainly, it was an interesting journey, and we've had a lot of learnings along the way. And I think probably 3 or 4 years ago, I was looking around for ways of improving how we did policy. I've come from a background, a lot of engineering, a lot of building for the cloud, building for software engineers. And so the idea of a machine readable policy format was always something that, felt natural, but really, was not something that we were discussing in government. Everything was done through Word documents, spreadsheets, without necessarily a formal structure to it. And that meant that both the policy was complex, changes were slow, and that we were really, not as effective as we could be. But that was something that we had in the back burner. And, everyone knew it was painful. Everyone felt it was painful. It just took too long to launch, to authorize, if we want to use the common terminology. But we needed something to improve that. But it was only really until we had a new permsec join, as well as some change in leadership, where there was a very strong focus in fixing some of the key challenges. What we actually started off was not going towards a machine readable format, but just thinking about how we could simplify those things, being markdown, simplifying the policy language to make it approachable for a different set of audiences. We took it a little bit more of like a product management approach, thinking about various different consumers, being they the developers, the CISOs and the system owners, as well as auditors and other things. But that wasn't as effective, and it really came to a head when in the at one of our government conferences, our permsec stood up and said, we want to get rid of auditors, and we want to improve security. And everyone cheered, because I think that was, sort of talking to something that everyone felt the pain. It wasn't necessarily that we wanted to get rid of auditors, but it was that we wanted to change the focus on really what we were doing to deliver a system to market. And so, that really kicked off this journey. And part of that was starting to look at how we could make the entire process more effective. We really started to look at how, at least focused on the starting points of building a better rule book. That was looking at the controls and the profiles, as well as to the point of part of a system security plan. And that was an important part because it involved a huge amount of education. It involved a huge amount of buy-in. And it wasn't something that leadership was willing to take as a big bang effort that we could say, great, we're diving into OSCAL, we're going to implement it, and it's going to take us 5 years. The response back to us when we said, look, we are looking at machine-readable formats was, okay, prove that it works. Start with a smaller area, start to modernize, test it, but make sure that when you're working through this, you're getting feedback, that you're working with the development teams. And if they turn around and say, this sucks, go back to the drawing board. And so this was a very, very key shift in our mindset. It was driven by practitioners. It was not necessarily driven by policy developers or governance teams. Now, they're still equally and importantly involved, but it was about how we had this shift to make it practical to implement controls. And using a language that's familiar that teams could implement. So this was really our journey. And so last year was really our year that we started to roll this out, and we changed in some ways that one-size-fits-all model that we had in the past, that everyone had to comply with the same set of policy controls to be able to differentiate it between different risk materiality levels, that let systems have lesser controls, or to change the controls based on the parameters that we see for making it more effective and faster to deliver, but also then calibrating as we went up. The use of profiles. So we took a lot of the common parts and used them in slightly different means in terms of how we tiered things or leveled things, which was a much more of a translation between how it was done previously and really, where we want to start to think about, the transition across. And it may not necessarily be the end point. And that was a really important thing, because I think one of the things that we came in was this was not going to be perfect on day one. We had only started with really such a small part of this bigger story, as we talk about in, the earlier panels, of component definitions, the assessments. We really just started on that smaller piece just to make sure that it worked. And then we iterated on that to make sure that it got good feedback. We took an approach that was, let's have a beta release. Let's get it out and get feedback from various different agencies of various different maturity levels to make sure that the controls work, the approach works, but then also to tie it in with at least a dashboard or a portal that we could use to make it easier to author things like system security plans. Because at the end of the day, we're responsible not just for the policy as a central piece, but also the platforms that we can build out for the whole of government. We wanted to make it as easy as possible. And there is a little bit of that chicken and the egg. Obviously, it's government policy. It's our ICT and SS policy that we not necessarily have wide adoption internationally. And so we had to build it. There was not GRC tools necessarily to support it, but we needed to start somewhere and then let the rest of the industry catch up. And so now we're getting to that point in our journey where we're starting to roll out for the wider part and to port across a lot of our legacy policy, what we call IM8 Classic. And now really starting to think about what's next. And that's going to be a really key part as we start to do it. That piece that says, components, such a key part. We build our own platforms. We leverage CSPs. We leverage, many different COTS and SaaS products. How can we make it more effective? And then going towards how we do that means that for agencies who may be doing bespoke work, how do we have agents? How do we have tools and libraries that can help them be able to collect evidence, to validate that it is in fact in line with the controls that we're doing, all of the assessment plans and going on from there. So this is where we are today. It feels like we're only still at the very start of our journey. We're now starting to look at the industry about how we're doing that with our own cybersecurity agency. So this is very much the start of an important journey, but something that I think would only be possible with something like OSCAL as a common language. So it's a very, very important part. And it's a lot of mistakes I think were made along the way. But I think that's part of it. And I'm really happy to see that something like the foundation is coming out that can help in so many aspects of that.
So the hyperscalers that you are using in Singapore and in government and Google and AWS are here. Is there any perspective from cloud service providers of how such effort can be supported? Or what's the vision of collaboration and how could OSCAL support this collaboration and the new effort that the Singapore government is embarked on?
I think any opportunity, is this working? Working. Okay. Any opportunity really to automate, right? In the end, OSCAL's there in part to help automate all the things. Everything that we do, we try to automate, right? And the only thing that's not automatable are the things that require high touch, high judgment from human beings. But absent of that, what excites me about OSCAL is it's something that helped bring us towards that automation journey. I'm also interested a little bit in, from an international perspective, there's this forcing function from FedRAMP right now to publish via OSCAL, but internationally, are there other compliance frameworks as well, that could benefit from taking that first step and looking at OSCAL? And, we've seen pockets of success here with Singapore and Australia and in Canada and Spain and other places as well. And what Hunter's team did is really great, and looking forward to seeing more of that internationally.
Yeah, no, I would add to that. I think what, hope this is working. What Hunter is doing, what we would like to see ideally is that you can have more automation in the space around audits. So I think earlier there was a comment made about how it's too much. There's too much that's inside of it, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. And what do you choose? And I think that's actually a good thing because ultimately it's a language, and so it's going to be very comprehensive. I think it's up to the regulators and certification bodies to determine what do we actually care about in these frameworks, and then start using things like OSCAL to go express them. So at the very beginning of this whole regulatory challenge that everyone faces is you have regulators develop laws. They can sometimes by design be somewhat vague or abstract, and there's different reasons for that. But I think if you start there and you start like thinking about things in a machine readable way and ways that can be measured, that language can be more of a forcing function to move us away from like ambiguity towards more objective things that we need to comply with to demonstrate our levels of security, compliance, and assurance. So, I mean, what I would love to see is for privacy regulations, banking regulations, and just regulations in general to adopt control frameworks, whether they're NIST or CSA, and just start expressing their requirements in more technical ways that are easier for us to ingest and measure. And then for customers, auditors, and everyone else to just use something like OSCAL to get like a real-time perspective into what a CSP security posture is, or even for a regulator to do the same.
And I think that, Jim, with your many years of experience with the Cloud Security Alliance and with the STAR program, I think that you've seen also a lot of efforts of trying to align and bring forward and demonstrate what the security posture is for different services. And I know that we try to work at length on reciprocity and how can we accomplish that?
Yeah, so compliance is really part of the origin story of the cloud. It's like, I think you all know, when this came up so virally, that so many organizations said, this is cool, and we can't use it because it's someone else's computer and we don't know if we can trust it. And still today, there are a lot of organizations like that, even though it's the dominant IT system. So that was why we started in trying to build these frameworks. And it actually seems really easy, what you have to do in federal government, because a lot of our very early members were very large enterprises that had operations in every country in the world that all had their own unique bespoke IT regulations, different levels of maturity, different levels of auditors, that I'd have some of the CISOs tell me in the early days, we're spending 75% of our budget just on compliance. And so as we've moved forward, and it was a couple of years ago that we finally figured it out and understood what you were doing, and we put OSCAL inside of our cloud controls matrix as a way you could deliver it. We've started seeing companies, vendors, I think Travis' company was probably the first we saw even before we had it in there, but they're starting to implement it because, hey, they download our cloud controls matrix and they put it in there. And so I think there's so many projects we're working on where we're thinking about how we can use OSCAL, like even changing our STAR registry, which is a pretty static repository of like 4,000 cloud providers, using OSCAL to allow that submission back and forth and the updates, and not just every time they get audited to go up there. So, at the end of the day, trust, assurance, compliance, the data around that is only valuable if it's in motion. And to do that in the right way, you need some sort of circulatory system around trust and assurance. And I think OSCAL's got just this great opportunity to be the standard for our global circulatory system for GRC, assurance, trust. So pretty excited about it. But yeah, I think this combined with what Vikram works on, his focus, continuous controls monitoring, and just the great advances we're seeing in generative AI to analyze the data, agentic AI to make this more accurate, get rid of the hallucinations. I think that we're just very excited about how we can, I like to tell Hunter, let's get rid of the auditors. It's like, we're not going to do that, but we're trying to be very bold about we really can make big strides and we can really transform how people think about this. And it comes back a lot to what you're doing here.
Maybe not get rid of the auditors, but let's get rid of control C and control B, right? Copy and paste, right? Between and to your GRC tool. So I think that's, you wrote a blog post a couple years ago and you said something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing, but you said security and compliance specialists and adjudicating officials need not understand OSCAL language in order to do their work. In the end, OSCAL's for the tools. That was your quote, OSCAL's for the tools. And I liked what you said there, because that's where I think a lot of the focus and something the foundation can help out with is on the tooling front as well. Success with OSCAL does not mean that everybody's learning the nuts and bolts of OSCAL. Don't get me wrong, some people are going to have to learn that, but success really is people are leveraging tooling which under the hood is using OSCAL.
So my initial vision when we discussed OSCAL and we implemented OSCAL was that tomorrow will give us a better understanding of the security posture of our systems, because we will be able to employ MML or artificial intelligence to analyze those systems, to learn from the documentation that is very accurate with fine granularity, how the controls interact in different environments and different ecosystems for different systems, because they can be very specific. And then be able to keep in real time track of what's going on with your system. And what if there is a new vulnerability out there that on day zero that can be exploited, and expand OSCAL on a threat-based approach. Move OSCAL to a next level. So today we have OSCAL in middle school. Can we together take OSCAL to get a PhD? I think that that will be something that will be a dream come true for all of us. We have several models, two of them in particular that we built today that are still in prototype, and calling on the community to test them before they put them out as releases. This is the mapping model, which cloud service providers are using at length, and the reciprocity is leveraging the mapping model between controls. But where I see an importance is to test the models not only to have a representation of the maps between controls at the regulatory framework, but based on how you implement those. How do we take that to the implementation level? How will hyperscalers benefit from that, or how a STAR program will benefit from that? And how that can be actually moved towards decomposing systems and look at shift left the security and capture that even in a component definition. Because when entities are adopting a cloud solution, they're not adopting the entire system or the entire package as today STAR is providing or FedRAMP is providing. Agencies are cherry picking different services that based on their needs. So this is part of the vision that I have, and I think that the foundation can play a crucial role on helping and supporting this. But I'd like to understand better, what do you think that will be most important aspect? And if that's a direction where we should take OSCAL after it matures in version 1.
Specific to the foundation and helping with the process?
Right. What will benefit AWS, for example?
Yeah, well,
how can the foundation help AWS to,
or for that matter,
globally,
for the whole community, right? Is like the FedRAMP effort's been this forcing function, and perhaps the foundation can create some non-binding goals, put the stake in the ground for some of these regulatory bodies to consider how they're going to move forward and take those first steps. You know, Hunter took that first step, and it was bumpy, it may be a little bumpy along the way, but you have to take those first steps. AWS did it back in 2022, and others have done it as well. So I would say, how can the foundation help out? It's really maybe encouraging
acceleration. Right?
Yeah, encouraging the acceleration of adoption through some, non-binding stakes in the ground.
Yeah, again, I would say it's a acceleration. I mean, I think that a lot of companies could probably implement OSCAL. The confusion that you hear about, I think it's just generally if you give it to like someone who understands your GRC system, they can look at OSCAL and very quickly start understanding, oh, I'm supposed to like make changes to my GRC platform. I get it. So I think it's about like getting OSCAL more into the hands of like some of these engineering areas and tooling companies that they can implement it. And then for the practitioners to just to be able to start using their new GRC solutions and everything else with these capabilities built into it. But I would say again, it's like, what could the foundation do to accelerate, the development of tools that support OSCAL, whether it's doing it themselves or partnering with software companies, helping them, consulting, advising them. And it's also just, it's helping to accelerate adoption and everything that's involved in that. It's getting more agencies like we have in Singapore to start thinking about automation.
Yeah, I say there's a lot of greenfield opportunity. I think that it's for us, it's sort of a nirvana if any new regulation had an OSCAL format. It'd be great if regulators were writing things in OSCAL. And so I think there's a lot of that tooling that we need to work on, a lot of the core things out there. I had a conversation, I think most people here probably know Tony Sager, CIS, NSA, and he was expressing, and he's been part of these, the frustration with just how some control catalogs, they're just so huge. And even though the really valuable controls that reduce the risk the most might be very small, and it's where SANS 20 started and things like that. But I think that stuff's gonna be very unique for every organization over time. And I think the more and more we can use this to be very, very contextual about an organization doing a project using these technologies to service these customers is going to really be a game changer when we can do that. And I think it's not all going to be what the foundation does. It's like, how do you enable that? It's going to really, just like with CSA, most of the value is going to be with partners who are able to take what you have and build upon it and build the use cases. And maybe cataloging a lot of that is a great thing you can do.
So from this perspective, I think that Foundation is instrumental on keeping OSCAL, the core OSCAL robust and promote the core OSCAL. Because if we start having a lot of dialects, OSCAL dialects, I think that this is where is going to become problematic for tool vendors to use it. Now, I'm not saying that dialects are not important, but how do you tackle the dialect problem is also important, where I think the foundation can come forward with and support with a solution from the community. Because when you need to extend OSCAL, you need to have that extension mechanism well defined so tools can come and query that in a real time.
Perhaps I can ask Hunter a question. Hunter, you just went through this journey, I guess, approximately a year ago. There was no OSCAL Foundation when you started this. What would you have liked to have seen had there been an OSCAL Foundation around to potentially support you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think, having this a year ago or even, before that would have been a much easier discussion to be had internally. Better confidence that there's an independent foundation that, the structure probably lends itself well to showing that it's more than just the US. And I think that's a really key part for, the global. Although OSCAL is obviously machine readable, it's something that can be used anywhere. The important part is really starting to, as it gets out there, the awareness for the broader industry. We took I wouldn't say a gamble necessarily, but we certainly, we dove in and tried it out. Australia did the same thing, and there's pockets of it coming. But I think, in order for it to be effective, Singapore's small, Australia's relatively small in the scheme of things. But as we get more global presence and more global visibility, this can actually really have a significant impact on how all of us start to improve how we're looking at both the compliance and security posture of the systems we're building across governments regionally, particularly in Asia, but globally as well. All of these things that potentially can lend themselves to having, translation of the documents, all of the kind of fundamental stuff. But then going beyond that, because I think, we're rewriting our rule book, but the reality is that most of them are being referenced from somewhere else. That mapping and that reciprocity is an important one that you know, when you start to get to be smaller, you know, we don't necessarily want to reinvent everything from scratch. There's only a few different ways you can write encryption at rest or encryption at transit. Let's not necessarily reinvent it. Let's make it more effective, because when we can capitalize on something that comes out of a common framework and a common approach, we can all benefit from that globally. So for us, you know, kind of a year ago, that would have been fantastic. But, you know, I guess we're now in a position where we're more comfortable and we can share those areas that, you know, can improve things for the better. So I think, you know, while a year ago would have been great, starting today is absolutely fantastic too, and we can build off, and very looking forward to, you know, how we can grow this as we go forward, particularly regionally.
I personally think that OSCAL Foundation can also support with educational components. NIST tried at length to educate the community, and I think to be able to monetize and get the best return in the investment, you need to understand OSCAL and OSCAL potential and align it with your processes. And we've seen that in our direct communication with Hunter and his team with Singapore, how important it is to represent your catalog of controls in a way that facilitates the process that you envision that you'll have in place. So having that educational component is crucial, because I had entities that in a silo went and adopted OSCAL and came later after pilots that cost money after 3-4 months piloting OSCAL and saying, OSCAL doesn't bring anything to us, because our auditors still have to stay there in front of the dashboard and break the controls down and say, no, I think you did not understand OSCAL. So understanding OSCAL, understanding what you can do with OSCAL, and it's not only for just security, because when we design it, we call it, and we have in there in the word security, because that was the hat I was wearing. But OSCAL and the models, if you think of them and look at them, can really help you in support and other controls as well as system controls that you can demonstrate how they are implemented. And that implementation is some actor's responsibility. And you might have several cycles until the system owner is happy with what it has as a system, and then it goes to the assessors and they can perform automatic assessment, and you can have that continuous reporting. But working together with cloud service providers, with vendors to document the security posture of the controls, I think is very important to the entire community to be able to leverage OSCAL and see the maximum return in the investment. We're approaching our end of the panel, so I would like, before we thank our audience, to allow you to see if you have any final thoughts. A brief, maybe 1 minute, 1.5 minutes.
Sure. So, you know, I think we're just at a very, a great point in time with just the confluence of the technology, the orchestration capabilities, the need that we're having, and generative AI. We're seeing, particularly with the new chain of thought models and structuring that with agentic AI, that this, I think it fits hand in glove. So I am super excited to try to incorporate OSCAL as a way to communicate trust in what we're doing in a lot of different ways. And I'd encourage everybody out there to be pretty bold in what your roadmap is for using this, and just say, you definitely have my support for how we can help be a amplifier for what you're doing across the world.
I love pushing boundaries, and I'd like to, encourage our communities to do so. So,
yeah, just following up, what Hart said as well. It's still early days, and there's still a lot of great things to be had here. I would just encourage people to, if you haven't already done so, take a look at some of the great resources out there on this website, and others have published great blog posts as well. Play around, try it out, see what you can do with it. And there's no time like the present, right? So you just get going. Yeah.
I would say plus one to that, just definitely encourage experimentation with it. We found a lot of value in it. It helped us to think through different ways of like structuring our schemas, the way we'll exchange information between systems, different things like that. And if you kind of step back and just think about like how that audit process can be automated, I think there's a real achievable goal that requires a good bit of collaboration and coordination and influence. But I think there's a real opportunity to reduce a good bit of the toil that is associated with just being audited. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. From my perspective, the previous panel also tackled that. I think that we do not pay enough attention to decomposing our systems to components, to component definition ability of representing not only from the vendor's perspective how different services or components can satisfy controls, can implement those controls, but also from an organizational perspective to create playbooks. So shifting left, not just security, we are used to the term to shift left security, but I think we can shift left security, we can shift left privacy, we can shift left safety, we can shift left accessibility, and we've seen that demonstrated by Singapore government. And I would like also to allow Hunter to tell us what is your last thought? What would you like to see coming next for you and from the foundation?
It's a really exciting time, I think. It's for us, we're only partway through our journey and we've got a lot of learning and a lot of things to come. Part of that is, the importance of the ecosystem, that we are now starting to bring it out into something that, is, being developed in the open. We're open sourcing a lot of our work, which is something that we wouldn't have considered in the past. Now we have a common structure and a common format. But then the engagement with partners like AWS or Google or any of our other vendors to be able to bring out that wider ecosystem for components, for automated assessment. All of these things are enabled by having something that's wider into a foundation, the greater awareness, also the understanding and education, because there's a lot of lessons learned by all of us as a collective. Being able to share that, being able to bring that in, and to look at different cases in how we work together. So I think we're really looking forward to the next few months and years. It's an ongoing journey that I don't think will necessarily stop, but with the outcome that we're not going to get rid of auditors, but we are going to make it more effective. We're going to reduce that toil. We want to be able to bring it better outcomes for the government that we're able to deliver with confidence, continuously. And that's going to be a really important one for us. So greatly looking forward to things.
Thank you. And thank you very much to all for collaborating with us with NIST, and looking forward to future collaboration with all members of the OSCAL Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No dot sticking, so don't worry about it.
Well, thank you for that. We'll get our next panel up here in just a moment. But I think one of the things that we've heard so far today, actually from both panels, and in particular this one, is that value of collaboration, coordination, particularly on the global scale. Like many of you, I've worked in international standards for a better part of my career, and being able to bring together that global community is incredibly important for this. And it's one of the driving reasons why the foundation was created, specifically to help drive OSCAL internationally. So it's great to hear that validates part of our mission, and looking forward to making it happen. So we should have our next panelists up here in just a moment. They're online. Let's get them going.
Hey, John, it's Josh Magri. My video has been turned off by staff. I think Julie's maybe similar, because we made the unfortunate decision to go on while your other session was going. So
we'll get that sorted, Josh. It's not personal, trust me. We would love to see your smiling face. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Josh. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and get the video taken care of. But why don't you go ahead and get us going?
Great. So I want to thank you all for supporting this foundation and either being online or in person today, particularly those in person. The snow has started to fall here in the DC area. But let's get to it because I know that we're between you and the exits, as it were. So my name is Joshua Magri, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of a not-for-profit trade association called the Cyber Risk Institute. And I am joined here by my colleague, John Goodman from the Cyber Risk Institute, as well as Julie Rohlena from US Bank. But I'm going to ask each of them to kind of provide a bit of a quick introduction of themselves and kind of the area and space within which they work, because I think that will be helpful for setting the context of why they've been supportive of kind of automation and OSCAL generally. So, Julie, if we could start with you.
Good afternoon. I apologize. I have a little laryngitis, so apologies for the voice. Julie Rohlena with US Bank. My responsibilities capture enterprise cybersecurity compliance program and implementation for the bank. This includes laws, rules, regulations, but also, as we're talking about with OSCAL, industry standards and expectations. So that's one of the roles I have here at US Bank.
Great. Thank you, Julie. And John.
Good afternoon. My name is John Goodman. Have worked for the Cyber Risk Institute for about 3 years and was in financial services for about 9 years before that. And I really serve as our kind of chief technology standards person. And really my role is to kind of facilitate and channel a lot of the subject matter experts at our member firms. We have nearly 100 financial services companies as members. And so we get that group together in SMEs and policy folks. And so we just try to, everyone has a common set of challenges. And so we're trying to leverage all of our talents and brain power towards that set of common problems. So I kind of facilitate and help in that channeling.
Thank you, John. And as I mentioned, my name is Josh, and I'm the CEO of the Cyber Risk Institute. And I do want to talk a little bit about the Cyber Risk Institute, because I think that will help inform a bit of the discussion here and why automation and OSCAL is something of importance to the financial services industry. Because in our journey really is a description of the challenge that many of the financial institutions have faced as it relates to the usage of standards and bringing those into a recognizable format that the regulators will accept. So the Cyber Risk Institute is a relatively new organization, but we've grown quickly. We're over 100 financial institutions, and we cut across the variety of subsectors that we have, whether it be insurance or market utilities, banks, etc. We're also global in scope. And much like the OSCAL Foundation, which is just beginning, Cyber Risk Institute was started to address kind of a challenge that many were facing. And the challenge was that you had a variety of standards out there that were great and people were utilizing, such as the NIST cybersecurity framework and the NIST 853 set of standards, and then also the ISO 27000 control suite. But we also, financial services are unique in that we are probably the most regulated sector in the entire global economy. So within the United States alone, there are 9 federal regulators, 3 self-regulatory organizations, and then the 50 states that all address cybersecurity. And really in about the 2015 to 2017 timeframe, that's when our regulatory community started to really become active in terms of pushing out regulatory guidance as it relates to cyber and IT. And Jim Reavis from the Cloud Security Alliance, an organization that we've worked with and continue to work with, he mentioned that challenge of the 70%, in terms of time spent. we were seeing that on the compliance front. And so we realized that in order to essentially get cyber defenders back on cyber defense, we had to come up with a standardized assessment that would be useful not only to the financial institution cyber defenders, but also the regulatory community to assure them that the firms were doing what they were supposed to be doing in an appropriate manner, and making sure that really the customers were being served and served securely. So with that, we developed something called the CRI profile, which essentially is almost like a common college app for regulatory compliance. Ours, however, is a beautiful spreadsheet downloadable for free. You can go to our website and utilize it. But we know that it has limitations, and the limitation is around the manual nature of inputting the responses and evidencing that controls are actually being followed. So this brings us to kind of the first question about automation. So I'd like for you, Julie, to tell us a little bit about the work that you do and how you're currently using automation in your work at US Bank.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So as Josh kind of described a little bit about the Cyber Risk Institute in the CRI profile, we have actually leveraged something called a concept of control objectives. And we take things like the CRI profile.
Oh, looks like Julie may have cut out, which is unfortunate. John, while we await Julie to come back on,
Sure.
Perhaps you can kind of give a recitation. Oh, Julie, are you back?
I hope so.
Okay, so we lost you when you were talking about control objectives.
Yeah, thank you. So with control objectives, we actually, and I heard with some of the other presenters as well, that implementation state. And we have developed through multiple tools, and we're looking at something like an OSCAL or other tools like that, but to integrate objectives for that implementation at that system level, that entity level, that facility, and looking at those implementation tactics to meet some of those other obligations that, like CRI Profile 2.0 and the CSF 2.0, GLBA 12 CFR 30B, so that we can actually test once to comply many concept and scale that out. And that's something that we've been working on for the last few years, and has had some success with that model. One of the challenges is that automation piece, where an assessor may need to look over your shoulder and do some shoulder surfing. That level of automation is something that I think is a challenge and opportunity, but also that scalability for control testing, so that you can test once, comply many, and reuse that validation effort over and over again.
And John, if you could describe some of the areas where CRI is looking into automation to better assist its members in the wider community.
Sure. Kind of as I mentioned earlier, we tend to focus on common problems that our members are having, and certainly among those, as we've spent a couple of hours talking about already, is they of course have a very heavy compliance burden, and they need to be able to demonstrate to internal audit and the regulators that they're doing the things that they're supposed to. So there's a lot of focus and people working in that space. However, the integration of that with the technical engineers and the people designing and building the controls and then doing the control testing is kind of the next space of challenge. We see that there's a lot of opportunity for some further standardization and further common ways of approaching their problems. So we've had various members that have been doing different pilot projects and working with different vendors that are in the space. We also have a number of vendor partners we work with, AWS and IBM and so forth, that are doing various types of automation of controls, of control monitoring, of control dashboards. So we've also been working with vendors the likes of RegScale and some of the other vendors that are looking at OSCAL as a means of facilitating this orchestration of information. So we've done some explorations, and we've actually created an OSCAL working group, subgroup within our member base. One of our members has already translated the CRI profile into OSCAL. One of the, I think, very first use cases we want to derive from that is to take, we've got mappings to, I don't know, over 24 or so different financial services regulations and guidance and so forth. So one of the things they really want to be able to do is store all of those mappings within OSCAL, be able to generate different views of how their compliance situation is from the telemetry and the collection of the monitoring, but be able to represent that in a number of different forms for the different regulators and so forth. So that'll be one of the use cases we'll be focusing on initially, but that then expands into a very broad array of standardizing different types of documentation presentation. You know, if you look in banks today, they've, you know, you might have 100 banks, you'll have 100 different versions of how particular documents work or look. So there's just huge opportunity there for finding common ways to address their problems.
Thank you, John. And one of the things I'll just note, kind of tongue in cheek as it relates to automation and efficiencies, right, is that for financial services, typically we have the money, but we don't necessarily have people with time, you know, to execute. I think you heard again that those figures of 40 to 70%. So even in putting together this panel, kind of came together rather quickly. There were a number of folks that were looking to kind of participate, but just didn't have time to get it through their own internal approval processes. So we really think that to the extent that we can help our mutual members in streamlining their processes and really speed to decisioning and speed to action is a good thing. So John mentioned some of the ecosystem partners that we're working with. You know, I know RegScale is in the room, and they'll be talking a little bit about some of the work that they're doing, probably off in side conversations today. But we're really excited to see taking something like our profile, which is a one-to-many type framework, having it embedded in RegScale. And you can start to then know where you stand in terms of your assessment at the push of a button, and not how you might have been, you know, 5 weeks ago as you were gathering evidence, and then how that correlates down the line to even very specific devices. And that's something that you heard AWS, which is also an ecosystem partner, talk about, and Palo Alto. They've definitely gone down the road of automation and taking a look at how do we automate controls, so that way you get a view of how your system is at the moment that you're actually looking at it, and not what was brought to you in an assessment from 5 weeks before. So moving on to kind of the next question. OSCAL has been in use by organizations, specific use cases. I was wondering if, you know, you might be able to talk a little bit about how you all are using it or are planning to use it at US Bank, Julie. And I know John's given a flavor of some of this stuff, but we can probably expound upon where we're seeing some of our members, aside from US Bank, also using it. Julie.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So I'm going to speak to the narrow scope in which my team operates. And OSCAL is something that is relatively new to us. I mean, we've been kind of following the maturation of OSCAL for the last couple of years, but it's relatively new to our organization. We have used it as a, albeit cross-reference, if you will, to help support some of the other activities that we've been looking at, and use it really more for auditability and to use it as a justification of some of those interdependencies. That's something that we will continue to try to stratify and mature as we see OSCAL continue to mature, as Josh kind of mentioned in that partnership with kind of broadening the horizons as far as that those laws, rules, regulations with those industry standards and benchmarks.
Thanks, Julie. And then John.
Well, I'd say financial services is still very much in a nascent stage with respect to OSCAL. That's probably for a couple of reasons, but I think having a standard like the CRI profile that really kind of translates the compliance world into the various regulatory bodies they need to work with was a key piece to the puzzle to set them on this journey. And as I'd mentioned, we do have a number of firms that I think now see the promise of, okay, now that we've got kind of a good control framework that we can use to, talk to CSA, CCM, and talk to CIS, and we're working on 853 mapping now. The promise is really, lighting their eyes, and particularly, I don't know how we'll leverage it yet, but we're also now working with MITRE on mapping to the attack framework. Our financial services threat folks are really excited about that. And if we can get that, built into OSCAL and start seeing not just, this relationship between the controls and components of systems and how they relate from a compliance perspective, but also start tying in how that relates through a threat perspective, that would be something that would be of huge value to them.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've had the benefit of seeing, John, without naming a particular institution, but it was a global institution. And they essentially took the profile and OSCALified it, and were able to then deploy like an AI chatbot against it and query that AI chatbot and say something to the effect of, how many devices are in and out of compliance as it relates to authentication and New York DFS. And we got to see it pop up, like 3 devices, so that is some of the capability and functionality that we find really promising, and which we've seen from some of the members that we would hope to have come and talk to you today, because it really is this idea of being able to go from all the different frameworks and standards mapped together in kind of a harmonious way, down to actually the device level, and you can not only see what is in and out of compliance, but what controls are in place, what threats are being mitigated. The possibilities there are really quite encouraging, particularly as it relates to OSCAL usage. So, one of the questions that we were talking about was, what do you think could make OSCAL more pervasive in terms of its use? How would you like to see it used in the future? Julie.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And you actually hit a key topic that's been very near and dear, is to be able to translate the information from compliance to threat and risks. And conversely, a threat and risk to the compliance implications and mandates through something like an OSCAL tool. So as we look at the implementation at a device level, depending on who you're speaking with, executive leadership may speak better from a threat and risk implications and impact. Meanwhile, if you're talking to your compliance and legal team, looking at it more from a compliance legal ramification perspective. So playing to your audience and the implications, but having the totality to see what are the impacts at an entity or device level, both from a threat and risk perspective and a compliance, to help correlate the relationship between threats and risks on one side and our compliance and regulatory mandates on the other, to really stratify that and then let them come together through a unique harmonization.
Right. John.
Well, I think I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I do see longer term a huge opportunity in being able to standardize some of the artifacts around compliance and control, monitoring, and so forth. You know that, and I'd also mentioned that financial service has been a bit slow to pay attention to OSCAL. I think that's partly because, deriving from FedRAMP 853 and that kind of view of system management and having things like system security plans and authorization boundaries, that's not typically the way financial services thinks about it. They have a different kind of mindset. So they were slow to think about it that way. But as you start thinking about standardizing those types of things, they've already seen the power of being able to do it through the profile and things like the cloud profile. I think there are huge opportunities in driving that kind of standardization across the sector. That, I think, also has kind of indirect benefits in two ways. One, with the vendor community, because that will increase the usability and quite frankly, the saleability of particular tools to help in the space. But also there's kind of as you're very well aware, Josh, you probably more than anyone, the very unique kind of symbiotic relationship between the financial services firms and the regulators can tend to improve and feed upon itself. It's not always just the regulators telling financial services what needs to be done. In a lot of cases, it's the financial services firms themselves coming up with new and better ways of doing things that then kind of, change the expectations on the regulatory side. So I think there is that, kind of symbiotic set of improvements that can happen over time.
And John, thank you for raising that, because I think it was Jim Reavis that talked about a nirvana state, and in my mind, like a nirvana state would be one wherein regulations come out and they address the actual threats of the day as well as future threats, right? And one of the ways to assess whether a lot of the regulatory Sturm und Drang is actually effective is to look at it through the lens of automation and continuous control monitoring, wherein you could say, well, we have perhaps 20 controls addressing this particular area, but in terms of the threats that are being addressed and the controls that are being challenged, they're very, very few. But here we have a limited set of controls, but these are the ones that we're seeing more threats on a daily basis. So perhaps this is the area where regulators should either focus more of their regulations or their whole assessment process to make sure that the controls that are in place are working effectively. So, what would be kind of your nirvana state, Julie, in terms of automation, OSCAL, and financial services regulation? Oh, we may have lost Julie there. Julie, are you there?
Yeah, apologies. My video must be on a timeout perspective. What was the question?
The question was, what would be your nirvana state as it relates to OSCAL, automation, financial services, regulatory compliance, etc.?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So my nirvana is that we all spoke the same language, that we had that harmonization. As was shared, I have a history and background with FISMA and FedRAMP and 853, but being able to translate that into that regulatory compliance speak, but also translating it into a threat and risk speak, it's as if multiple individuals are speaking multiple languages on top of the multiple dialects across the entire globe. Transforming that into some level of consistency and harmonization would be a huge nirvana for financial firms, so that when a new regulation is created or something is changed, that there is a common dialect and a common language to be able to translate that from what this means, as well as that implementation state. And the implementation state may be subjective, depending on the scalability of the organization. That said, you have opportunities of what that implementation looks like. And then the enforcement of that, obviously up to different companies. But that would be the nirvana state, is that having that harmonized standard language and terminology, so that we can hopefully all speak the same language.
John.
Well, I was going to say we'd be remiss if we didn't also talk to the third-party risk management implications in financial services. Third-party risk is a very heavily regulated and draws a lot of attention and resources within financial services. So the extent, and we're really happy to see, particularly the cloud service providers, and we're working with AWS and Google and IBM as well on some of the cloud profile work, but we're then extending that into some pilot efforts. But to the extent that some of those efforts can be automated through OSCAL reporting, real-time and otherwise, through OSCAL, translated perhaps through CSA and some of the cloud profile mappings we've done there, that will could derive huge benefits from a again a vendor financial services relationship, in terms of being able to facilitate not just the upfront how are we going to manage this relationship, to the ongoing management, monitoring, and ease with which you can do business together. So I think there's a lot of promise in financial services for that.
And I just want to throw in one other piece, because I had talked a little bit about Nirvana State earlier, but I do want to mention there had been this thought or conversation about regulators writing in kind of their legalese and then essentially maybe adding a OSCAL appendix. That is something that we would wholeheartedly support, because essentially the Cyber Risk Institute exists because there was this gap between what regulators would say are the regulatory provisions are and how that translated to the enterprise. And if you take a look at the NIST series of controls as well as their framework, then there was also this gap the other way of saying, okay, here's how this translates to compliance. So we've seen where regulators in the past have said, okay, here's what these regulations means, and here's how they relate to existing frameworks and standards. And that has streamlined the process, I think, for all involved. So we would definitely support the regulatory community putting out provisions in an OSCAL ready format as well, perhaps as an appendix. So one of the things that folks had asked us in putting together this session is whether we would be open to Q&A. And so I don't know if there's some questions that the group would like to pose to us in the room. I see some online, but please tell us how to proceed. I think we have about 6 more minutes for our session.
Hey, Josh, this is John. Hello?
Hello, yep.
Yeah, I think we might have some questions online, but let me check the room here first. Does anybody have a question for this panel before we? No? Okay, so let me re-unlock my phone. So one of the questions we got online is, Have you brought in the financial management folks from government to think about adopting OSCAL for financial controls? This seems like another domain that is dependent on audits, so private and public sectors can benefit from OSCAL. I think you touched on that a little bit earlier, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on how you're coordinating with some of the regulators or on the more on the public sector side.
Sure. So Cyber Risk Institute is a bit of a unique organization. I mentioned, the standards piece, but we also go out and engage with the regulatory community. So one of the things in financial services that you may have seen was that our banking regulators, through the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council, recently sunset their cybersecurity assessment tool. And in doing so, they put out a statement that said, hey, that worked well for a time, but we think that there are other global standards out there that probably work better for this time. And they mentioned CRI, its profile, but they also mentioned NIST CSF, and I think there were some folks from CIS earlier in the room. So we've been engaging the regulators around kind of this approach where the profile provides a streamlining and aggregation of the various provisions under one common assessment template. Now that we've kind of gotten that squared off, I do think that you will start to see us engage more with them about this idea of, hey, is something that is done in OSCAL within an enterprise something that you would be willing to accept in some type of format or file format? But I don't see that as being anything that we'll tackle in 2025. I think that's 2026, 2027. John, I don't know if you have any.
Well, the only thing I was going to mention, I won't mention the name of the very large U.S. regulatory agency that we've had multiple discussions with them about FedRAMP generally, not financial services adopting FedRAMP, but just some of the benefits of the FedRAMP program and how they could be potentially applied within financial services. I don't want to lead anyone down that road. But they have been extremely interested in the work that we've been doing on OSCAL. And so I think given the level of interest that we've seen from them, I could see where that could blossom into something potentially more impactful at a later time. But that would be something slow to evolve. But we'd certainly be open, if Singapore is doing something along these lines. We've talked several times to Monetary Authority of Singapore on the financial services front. We'd be more than happy to see if we can find some firms that would like to do some pilot projects or something. And we've had good success in Australia, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I think that's it for us here. So everyone, please join me in thanking our panel. Appreciate all your input.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we're going to move on to our last session of the day. So I'll have Stephen come up here in just a minute to kind of go over a little bit more detail about what the foundation is, what it's going to be doing. We will probably have a little bit of time for questions there at the end as well, and then we will retire upstairs to have some refreshments. So it is not snowing. Do not look out the windows. It's perfectly fine. Nothing to worry about. But anyway, Stephen, come on up. Over to you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephen, and really happy to see all of you here. Thank you. This is a super, super exciting meeting. Happy to see so many familiar faces, but also so many new ones adding to our plan here for the OSCAL Foundation. I had the honor of working with, that's the double mics I see. The honor of working with Dr. Iorga as well as Wendell at NIST on OSCAL. Before I moved over to Venable. And so I have a long history with OSCAL. It's very close to my heart. And it makes me feel very, very excited and very happy to see this many people and this many organizations excited about it and working on it. With that said, we've heard a little bit about what it is, the foundation, its mission, its goal. We've heard a lot about the why we care about OSCAL. I want to talk very briefly about the how. This is, let's see if I can figure this out. There we are. There is a lot of questions I've seen online and from people about, okay, we know what the foundation wants to do. How are we actually going to do it? What is the structure? And what are some of the activities going to look like in more detail for the first year? So there's two parts of this. The first is organizationally, what does the foundation look like and what does membership mean? I'm going to talk about that first. After that, I'm going to talk about a little bit more technically how work is actually going to look in the foundation and how it is we're going to accomplish some of these discrete goals. So first up, membership. There's three groups of membership in the foundation, generally. And the first I'm going to talk about is general membership. Also be talking about the technical advisory group and the steering committee. These are the three main categories that we'll be talking about. First up, general membership. The key thing that I want to emphasize here is the OSCAL Foundation is dedicated to improving the OSCAL standard in getting more adoption and really just driving it overall. To that end, general membership in the OSCAL Foundation is free. What this means is that anybody that wants to subscribe to the mailing list, anybody that wants to participate in the mailing list, taking part in conversations towards trying to follow the foundation's mission, you may do so just by subscribing with your email address. You may attend the meetings, working group meetings that are being held. We don't want to exclude anybody that could bring something good to OSCAL and the OSCAL ecosystem. That is far and away our primary objective. Additionally, once we start talking about actual code contributions in the technical section, the general membership will also be able to submit code suggestions, code changes, and pull requests to the GitHub repo. So this is important. We want to make sure that if there's smart people out there, if there's people working on OSCAL, they can help us in this mission regardless. The second group I want to talk about, and this is the first membership class above general membership, the technical advisory group. We envision this as the group of people that are the technical experts in OSCAL. Whether you're a vendor, you're a user, you're some part of the ecosystem, you have a stake in the technical nitty-gritty of how OSCAL actually functions, whether that's in the schema definitions, whether that's in profile resolution, or some part of the standards overall. The technical advisory group oversees all of the technical work that happens at the OSCAL Foundation. That means they're going to be responsible for reviewing and approving any pull requests against the OSCAL Foundation GitHub repo. They're going to be reviewing and approving any suggested changes before we send them to NIST. So this will be the group responsible for seeing anything that we send over for proposed changes to the standard. We'll have to go through the tag first. If the tag has any issues with it, says take it back, change it, work on it, the working groups will go and do that, return it back to the tag. The other thing the technical advisory group is going to be overseeing is the extension registry. This is a concept I'm not going to go into detail on today, but the foundation is excited to be offering a solution for third parties to register OSCAL extensions with the foundation in a way that makes them publicly accessible and readable by hitting a static endpoint. This will allow for third-party tool vendors to extend OSCAL for specific use cases without requiring a change to the core OSCAL itself. We will be talking more about the extension registry in the near future, but in the sense that it's relevant here, the technical advisory group also oversees that work as well. Final group here is the steering committee. This is the high-level strategic group responsible for guiding the foundation as a whole towards the foundation's mission. The steering committee's primary means of influence is nominating and electing the board of directors. Foundation is led by a board. The steering committee is responsible for both nominating and electing those directors. Additionally, any of the new working groups and general workflows of the foundation are going to be decided on, voted on, approved by the steering committee. So the general direction of the foundation, as well as the strategic implementation of its objectives, is really all coming from the members that are in the steering committee. Okay, so your 3 membership classes. For more details about how the foundation is going to be organized in terms of specific bylaws, specific voting information, information like that, we will be talking about that in future meetings. It's a lot of heavy stuff that we're happy to talk about and excited to talk about, but don't quite have the time to go into today. So please reach out either by the contact form on the website or email John with any questions, and we'll be happy to get back to you on structure and governance questions. The second part of what I want to talk about is a detailed dive into the technical how of how we intend to do some of this work. This is relevant to anybody who is currently a contributor to the OSCAL work. So if you are already collaborating with NIST, if you have engineers who are collaborating with NIST by submitting code or attending workshops, then this is the information that is relevant for you. The first 2 work streams that we're proposing, and I think proposing is an important word because this is a membership-driven organization. We're proposing 2 initial work streams. The membership may decide that there are ones that are in addition to this, also very important, or that we want to direct our focus somewhere else. So think of these really as examples of the kind of working groups that the foundation will be putting together. The first one, let me get through, Michaela, and then we'll do questions at the end. The first one is the model development group. This is the group that is going to be doing the nitty-gritty technical work for the OSCAL standard and schemas. So this is coding, this is submitting to a GitHub repo, this is very technical work. We envision this being structured like the open source development communities that are already popular in various ecosystems around the world. It's a place for people to submit code, discuss code, and actually work on the real concrete individual micro problems, right? This is not a high level strategic group. This is what is the name of a property in an XML file, right? It's a little dry, but this is the important work that we can build consensus on as a community, because these things end up mattering. And we really want this to be a consensus building group for the community to build together. What do we think is the good change for OSCAL? What do we think we want to submit to NIST as a proposed change? So this group will also include open source tooling. This is something I've talked to a lot of you about already. And I'm super excited to look into it more. I've already talked to probably 3 or 4 member organizations about tools that they have been working on, and maybe would even be interested in sharing with the foundation as open source tools. So in addition to working on the model itself, we see the model development group as working on these open source toolings in a collaborative way. You know, we want to have a GitHub repo where we are providing open source tools, we're providing open source resources, and every week when this group meets, we'll actually be working on these things in a very real way. In addition, the extensions that I talked about earlier will be handled here in this group, in the sense that if you have a extension to OSCAL that you're interested in bringing to the extension registry, this is the group you would bring it to. This is where it would be discussed. This is where the details of it would be hashed out, put down on paper, and then officially registered with the OSCAL registry at the foundation website.
Stephen, can I chime in with just one thing real quick? I want to just drive home a point to this first bullet. I think it's a really important one, which, oh yeah, sorry, I'm just going to go up here. That microphone is cutting out.
I just wanted to drive home this first bullet in particular, right? Which is the OSCAL Foundation is about doing a lot of this work, bringing the community together in order to get things in a more focused way over to NIST, right? It's not about trying to replace the NIST processes or anything along those lines. We've worked very closely with Michaela over the years, and I'm very much looking forward to continuing to do that. So we have it up here, but I just want to make sure that folks understand that while we're talking about the model development groups and we're talking about all of this outreach, we see this as something that is in collaboration with both NIST as well as other parts of the community. It's really meant to be collaborative in that way.
Yeah, and thank you, John, for that clarification. That is important. You know, we really see the foundation as a way of amplifying the success of OSCAL, of continuing to work on its adoption, and being a central point of collaboration for the community. This is an example workflow here. Some of this might not mean anything to you if you're not familiar with the GitHub flow. I've included this to make it clear that the model development group is really dedicated to doing real hands-on keyboard development work to make OSCAL the best that it can be. Really, the circular flow here of work is to identify feature, issue, some problem, identify what it is the group wants to work on, collaboratively work on it with members and anyone else who is involved in the collaborative work stream, get it all submitted, hash it out on phone calls, hash it out on mailing lists, have a genuine collaborative discussion to figure out the best solutions to any given problem that come up, then submit it. The technical advisory group will review it to ensure that it is advancing the mission of the foundation. If there's any issues, they'll kick it back, work it out. And then at the end, if this is a relevant suggested change to NIST, this change would be then submitted to NIST for their final review. This is an example workflow. Things might look different if we're working on an open source tool or if we're accepting open source tools from anybody else, just to give you an idea. The second proposed work stream here is the outreach group. The idea here is we talked a lot about how the foundation is going to help drive adoption by doing outreach, by going and doing speaking engagements where it's relevant, by talking to public and private partners, by educating, by explaining. And the outreach group is a way of collaboratively working on that issue, right? All of us are aware of individual events, of individual meetings, of individual relationships that we have with companies and public sector, but sometimes it's hard to bring all of that together. And by coming together and bringing our collaborative effort in terms of doing outreach and encouraging adoption, I think we can be a lot more effective. I think we can get a lot more coverage. I think we can talk to a lot more people. I think we can educate much more quickly. And I think we can generate a lot more educational materials working as a group. The idea would be to have a meeting on some regular cadence. Everyone comes together and says, any upcoming opportunities for encouraging the use of OSCAL, any upcoming opportunities to have a conversation with a public or private partner, and then working together on how to most effectively take advantage of that. So this is really how the foundation envisions collaboratively together as a membership driving OSCAL adoption. This is in addition to the work that the foundation and foundation staff will be doing themselves. So the foundation staff will be working on, for example, an educational webinar that John mentioned at the beginning of the event. So we are going to be working on producing those materials and making them available to members. In addition to that, the outreach group will be helping each other accomplish outreach at a much wider scale. Okay, I have talked through those things. There's a lot more technical detail there that I'm sure a lot of people are curious about. I do want to open the floor to questions with the caveat that super in-depth questions about bylaws or specific governance, it's probably a little bit too in the weeds for right now. You can send an email to us after this and I'd be happy to go into detail about it. But if people have questions about workflows, working groups, membership, or the general flow of how we're going to be accomplishing these things, I'd be happy to take questions in the few minutes that we have. And I can't see if we have any online or not. Oh, and Michaela, yes, thank you.
Thank you. I think that this is a fantastic start. What I wanted to add is the first stream or working group that you pointed out to was focusing on model development. You go to the next slide and a group, so very technical, but it's focusing on developing, improving, extending. I think that what we're missing today, based on my experience with people that I interact with, is defining best practices. I want to start. I'm a newbie. Where do I start? What do I have to do? So there are some efforts with the public sector to do so, but I think that the foundation can play a instrumental role in that direction too. Also, best practices, because I've seen at length that if you do not properly understand OSCAL and you do not know how OSCAL can serve your purpose, your processes, then you are on the wrong path and you get disappointed. It's somehow, close enough to the educational aspect, but it's one thing to explain what is today. Another thing is how to apply what is today the right way. And then what is that we are missing? Because engaging more people, you'll find better what is missing, where are the gaps and how to cover those gaps.
Yeah. Thank you, Michaela. Yeah, that's an excellent point. And is something that the foundation really believes is really important to cover, which is there is a world of educational materials and tutorials that go above and beyond like the intro course to OSCAL, right? We do want to provide that intro course to OSCAL. We want to provide, OSCAL for dummies, if you will. But in addition to that, there are a blend of technical and educational topics that, if you're an engineer who is familiar with a lot of these concepts, but maybe is not intimately familiar with OSCAL, you still need like an onboarding guide or perhaps specific use cases where we can go into great detail on how OSCAL is actually used in that specific use case in a technical way, like how it's actually applied. And I see that as a really valuable service that the foundation can provide. If the membership wants to introduce somebody to OSCAL, my goal is you can send them a link to our website that is a link to the specific detail level that you want to introduce that person at. I want to be able for you, the membership, to send somebody a link to a recorded webinar that discusses a specific topic that's relevant to that person you're trying to tell about OSCAL. I want all those resources available for my members because that's how you drive adoption, is by empowering all of you who are already going out and talking to people every day. I want to give you the tools and the resources that you need to make that easy, to make it fast, so that we can scale this up as quickly as possible. Please.
I have a question that's more around the membership. I mean, membership, I understand the roles of individual members. Have you given any thought to membership as individuals versus organizational membership? Because a lot of us are here representing corporations or other organizations.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and we actually have discussed it. But to be perfectly frank, we have not arrived at a great solution on how to address that. So we are open to suggestions, right, on how to handle it. As Stephen pointed out, anybody can join the working groups as an individual or as a representative of their company through the general membership. I sense your question has more to do with the tag or with the steering committee. Is that fair? Yes. So the bottom line is, if you want to join one of these groups as an individual and not as a company, just come talk to us so we can figure that out, right? As Stephen pointed out, and as a foundational part of this, it's inclusive. We want to find ways to be inclusive of anybody that is interested in this community, has something to offer this community. We'll find a way to work with you. So please just reach out to us. Don't get too wrapped around, well, I'm not a company or I'm not this, that, or the other thing. Talk to us about it so that we can try and figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, the foundation's goal through and through, down to its very bones, is to encourage the success of OSCAL, however we can do that. So if you have something to bring to the OSCAL ecosystem, please come and talk to us about it, because we want you to be able to contribute that in a way that helps OSCAL succeed. That's why we're here. Just in there if we have time. I don't know how we're looking at time.
Tying on to a question related to yours, membership agreement would have to have some kind of language about it being owned by the community, or anything you say is owned by the community. You can't it's understood. Is that stuff that you guys are working on? Are you going to be sort of in alignment with traditional best practices in that area? Because that can obviously be an issue for you when you join as an organization, because does my lawyer have to sign that? Right?
Yes, your lawyer must always sign everything. You are in a law firm, so I'm up to say that. Although I will point out that I have been accused of being an attorney. I am not actually an attorney. So even though I work here at this amazing firm, I am not a lawyer. But no, your question's a good one. So we have a set of bylaws. We have a set of parameters around what can the steering committee do and not do, what will the tag do. So all of that is sort of laid out, as is details around the membership agreement. The answer to the second part of your question is yes, it just follows best practices. We have not reinvented the wheel here. We are not the first people to come up. So it's going to be very similar to other organizations that you've seen and other organizations that we've stood up and run here. So I am going to wrap us up here. If you have other questions, I'm going to be sticking around. Hopefully most of you will be sticking around as well. So if you can go to the last slide, Stephen, with the info, that would be great. Hopefully. Thank you. All right. So I think today has been pretty amazing. I know in this community, the OSCAL community, most of you have known each other or known of each other for a long time. It's evident in the kinds of communities that have been built. I've had the pleasure of working with many of you, if not on OSCAL, on other projects over the years. So it is fun to come together to talk about this. I have so enjoyed today hearing about that shared vision and shared mission of what OSCAL can accomplish from a pretty diverse set of people, right? And we are only scratching the surface in terms of how OSCAL can help other sectors. And I think that there's a lot to be done there. So very, very excited about that. As we've pointed out, the foundation's here. We do have members. We're looking to grow that membership. I think we've heard today that collaboration is key. So you want to talk about it, you can reach out to me. We will have our OSCAL Foundation email addresses soon enough. For now, you can use my Venable email, but we'll get that updated. Want to talk to you, right? So if you've got questions about membership, if you're interested in just getting involved in any form, please let us know. I'll remind you on the table, there is a sheet. If you want to just fill out your information there, we'll collect those. Otherwise, please send me an email at this address. And visit our website, right? If you're not sure, you can come to the website, read up. We're going to be updating that with a lot more content in the coming weeks and months. So that'll be pretty active as things get built out. And as I mentioned earlier, for people who are members, we are going to start providing regular updates on sort of where we are with the tasks that we are undertaking, when membership meetings are going to be, what that's going to look like. So there'll be a lot sort of coming here in the very near future. We are literally just getting started. And as a couple people have said today, I think Hunter from Singapore and others, we're just scratching the surface, right, of I think what OSCAL can do for us. We've got these same assessment challenges in every sector, in every country of the world. And I think we all recognize that OSCAL can be a big part of making that easier, faster, and better and more secure, right, which is ultimately what we all want to accomplish.